The boost from the blazing sun, holy physique, is really something. Aegon smiled at the result and calmly stepped back, ignoring the whispers and gasps around him. By now, he was used to this kind of reaction. Or rather, he trained himself not to be swayed by it. Humans craved recognition and affection, and he was no exception. But he understood how dangerous that craving could become. If he started valuing the crowd's praise, he might end up chasing it. Then, before he knew it, he'd be doing things just to earn their admiration instead of walking his own path. It was a toxic cycle, and Aegon had no intention of getting trapped in it. So he decided long ago, only the opinion of his family truly mattered. Anyone else praising his talent or appearance, that was just noise. Even so, when Old Bai and Grandma Bai's smiling faces flashed in his mind, he couldn't deny it. Once in a while, it feels pretty good. He turned away from the main stands, only for his gaze to land on the student section. There, two familiar figures were standing, waving and cheering for him like the rest of the world didn't exist. Their bright, unrestrained smiles pulled one out of him too. In that moment, all the shocked voices faded away. Yeah, they're here for me. They actually care about me and my efforts. The exam resumed soon after. One by one, other participants stepped up to be tested, and one by one, many of them failed. The minimum requirement was rank 1, and unfortunately, not everyone had reached that level. If you couldn't step into rank 1 within 2 years, then the Supreme Apostle Academy simply wasn't your place. Before long, the first round concluded, cutting their numbers almost in half. The second part tests strength and endurance. Rank 1 on the body pathway, the skin tempering rank, revolved around tempering the skin through damage and recovery, using essence to heal it back stronger each time. Aegon expected the test to reflect that somehow. The head examiner snapped his fingers. The obsidian blocks they'd used earlier sank into the ground, replaced by a new set of similar-looking obsidian pillars. You will strike this block with your full strength, the examiner said. Each of you has 3 attempts. Your highest score will be recorded. The minimum requirement to pass is 3 Celtro. Step forward when your name is called. Aegon stifled a yawn. So this is why they say entrance exams are boring. All this waiting, he glanced at the obsidian block, curiosity stirring. I wonder how high I'll reach. Celtro was the unit used to measure force, or bluntly put, attack power. An ordinary human wouldn't even reach 1 Celtro, which made the pass requirement fairly strict. The participants began lining up, punching the block one after another. As expected, many failed to hit 3 Celtro. Most hovered between 2 and 3. An average rank 1 has around 2 Celtro, Aegon muttered. So they want at least 150% of that to pass. Not a bad standard. His interest finally sharpened when a familiar figure stepped up to the block. Hercules, huh? Let's see what you've got. The burly youth drew back his fist and slammed it into the obsidian. 4 embedded spheres lit up in quick succession. Murmurs rose around the platform. People who had dismissed Hercules earlier now looked at him as a serious competitor. Good. 4 Celtro at rank 1 is quite impressive, the examiner praised. Hercules only gave a small nod and walked back to the crowd. Did my presence really push him this far forward? Aegon wondered. Interesting. The test dragged on. For a while, even the audience's enthusiasm dipped. The numbers were decent, but nothing spectacular. Then someone new stepped onto the platform and immediately drew everyone's attention. Castor Stanford, age 17. Rank 2. That was all it took. With most candidates still at rank 1, a rank 2 body cultivator naturally became the center of curiosity. Castor was a tall, well-built young man with a long, stern face. He walked up to the block without a word and drove his fist into it with full force. Under the gazes of everyone present, the spheres lit up one after the other. They stopped at 6. That's a remarkable result at his age. He's Elder Stanford of the Merchant Association's son, right? Looks like the old man poured everything he had into raising him. Again, Castor said, as if 6 Celtro wasn't good enough. He punched a second time. The result didn't change. His expression didn't waver. He pulled his fist back for a third attempt and poured everything he had into it. This time, 7 spheres lit up. 7 Celtro. Now that's impressive. With that kind of foundation, his future is practically guaranteed if he joins the right house. There's already a house backed by the Merchant Association. He'll probably become their leader. Oh, right. He already has his backing set. Castor ignored the chatter. He simply turned, met Aegon's eyes, and gave a smug, victorious smile before leaving the platform. The hell are you looking at me for? Aegon thought, deadpan. And what's with that grin? That's irritating. The exam continued, and 3 more Rank 2 candidates showcased their strength. Even excluding the nobles who were already guaranteed admission, there were still plenty of outstanding people present. Each Rank 2 participant landed somewhere between 6 and 7 Celtro, drawing admiration from the crowd. But even as they punched, it was obvious where everyone's attention really lay. They were all waiting for one name. Aegon Valeria Augustus. Age 15. Rank 1. Finally, the stadium seemed to hold its breath as Aegon stepped onto the platform. Even he felt a faint flicker of anticipation. He had never bothered to measure his strength before. Let's see how much I've grown. He took his stance, pulled his arm back, and channeled all his physical power into his fist. Then he drove it forward. His knuckles crashed into the obsidian with a dull thud. Thanks to his tempered skin, his hand didn't even sting. The spheres lit up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then they stopped. Ridiculous. This is just ridiculous. 6 Celtro at rank 1. Was he made of? Unbelievable. The previous record holder was Aegon Augustus, wasn't it? Yeah, he hit 6 Celtro at rank 1 too. What kind of monsters is House Augustus raising? Even Aegon, watching from above, was taken aback. His smile deepened. Very interesting. Chinchio, what exactly did you bring into my academy? He was almost certain Aegon hadn't gone all out, and the boy still had 2 other pathways besides the body pathway. He had never seen such absurd talent in all his years. His gaze shifted toward the scar in the sky. No wonder she took that burden onto herself. Still, this is good. The more monstrous the students, the better for my plan. Down on the platform, Aegon could feel the heavy stares of countless people, especially the rank 2 participants. He glanced sideways and found Castor glaring at him like he wanted to break the block over Aegon's head. What's his problem? Aegon sighed inwardly. Fine. If you're going to be mad anyway, I might as well give you more reasons. He turned toward the head examiner and smiled. Again, you want another attempt? The examiner asked, slightly surprised. I didn't go all out, Aegon said casually. The stadium instantly erupted into whispers. Let me try properly. Very well. The examiner stepped aside. Aegon closed his eyes for a moment and let the feeling of twilight wash over him. For some reason, the transition between day and night always resonated with him more than the sun at its peak. Dawn and dusk, those times made him feel like the world itself was holding its breath. The boost I get from the sun at times like this really is something else. Living in dusk and Dawn City might be broken at this rate. He clenched his fist. Strength surged through his veins. When his eyes snapped open, they burned like twin suns. He sank into his stance, drew his arm back, and punched. No hesitation, no holding back. His fist cut through the air and slammed into the obsidian pillar. The spheres lit up again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Castor's eyes nearly popped out of his skull. The rest of the crowd wasn't much better, and then they all noticed something at the same time. The spheres were still lighting up. The audience shot to their feet as the spheres on the obsidian block kept climbing. For a moment, no one even breathed. They'd already been shocked when the 7th sphere lit up. Now, as more lights came alive one after another, even the nobles and instructors leaned forward, eyes glued to the dark stone. Murmurs died. The entire stadium watched in stunned silence. Even Amon's brows drew together, his usual calm replaced by genuine surprise. At the center of all that attention, Aegon stood in front of the block with a relaxed expression. His gaze followed the glowing spheres as they climbed higher and higher. Only when they finally stopped did he speak. 10 Celtro. So that's the limit, huh? The 9th sphere lit up. Then the 10th. And then it halted. The number burned into everyone's mind. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Important things should be repeated 3 times. What the actual fuck? He's 15 and already has the force to match rank 3. Am I hallucinating? Of course you are, you blind monkey. Why are you cursing me? Your face literally looks like dog's hit. Because you are blind, you idiot monkey. Oh, the stadium exploded into chaos. Up on the platform, Aegon's face stayed calm, but even he was taken aback inside. I didn't think the boost would almost double my strength. That's insane. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. If I used every card I have, I could probably go even higher. But this is enough. The record's already broken. He glanced toward the main seats where the Imperial siblings were sitting. Both of them were staring at him with intense, hungry eyes. He didn't need a mind-reading skill to figure out what they were thinking. So there's a throne struggle brewing, or they're getting ready for one. Either that, or the Emperor's in bad shape. And in either case, they want me. He shut his eyes and tuned out the noise as best he could. Excited chatter, frantic whispers, hurried transmissions to powerful families. All of it washed over him. Still, it does feel pretty good, he admitted to himself. Guess this is why people treat exams like a life or death battle. It was probably the same in my old world. He looked over at the other candidates. Some are chasing a better future, so just want applause. Same story, different world. He let out a faint smile and closed his eyes again. After a short pause, during which even the head examiner seemed stunned, the exam slowly crawled back on track. Eventually, they reached the final part of the trial. This one was the easiest for most people. It was designed to catch those who had forced their way into rank 1. Knives and daggers were launched at the participants at different speeds and from different angles. Rank 1, the skin-tempering rank, strengthened the skin enough to withstand sharp attacks to a certain degree. At worst, a properly tempered rank 1 would only suffer light scratches. But if someone had taken shortcuts or relied on artificial boosts, their body would have hidden flaws. Under the barrage of blades, those flaws would show immediately. That was why this test was both simple and merciless. It was also what made rank 1 special. It didn't just give explosive strength, it gave solid defense. Rank 2 is tendon reinforcement, Aegon recalled idly. When his turn came, he stepped forward, let the wall launch its daggers, and didn't bother to move. Metal clinked harmlessly off his skin, failing to leave even a mark. Most of the students who'd passed the second round followed suit, and passed just fine. Only a handful, who had clearly cut corners in their cultivation, ended up bleeding and were weeded out. In the end, about 300 participants remained. It really is boring sometimes, Aegon thought, glancing sideways at the stands. The crowd, however, was anything but bored. They were still buzzing about his performance, and he could practically feel the frantic messages being sent to noble estates and merchant halls. By now, his name was probably halfway across the kingdom. Everyone remaining has passed and will be admitted into the night class of the first year, the head examiner announced. However, resource distribution will be decided through a ranking tournament. All first years will fight for their place. He spent a few minutes explaining the rules and structure to make sure no one misunderstood, then clasped his hands behind his back. That concludes this portion of the exam. You may go and rest in the stands prepared for you. We'll call you when the tournament begins. He turned his attention to those still gathered below the platform. Anyone who wishes to enter the mage class, step onto the stage. So it really was as dull as they say, Aegon thought. He now understood why so few people bothered to come watch the entrance tests unless they had a direct stake in them. The Academy didn't want already polished monsters. They wanted raw talent they could shape. Of course, a process like that wasn't exactly a spectator sport. As the successful candidates filed off the platform, faces full of excitement and relief, Aegon stayed where he was. Why are you all staring at me? He wondered, feeling the weight of multiple gazes pressing into his back. Many of the participants were obviously confused. From their perspective, everyone who passed was supposed to leave and rest, yet he was still standing in the same spot. The audience shared that confusion. The examiner, too, gave him a puzzled look. Only a few people, Amon and a handful of dukes, stayed relaxed in their seats, faint, knowing smiles tugging at their lips. Why are you still here? The examiner finally asked, voicing what everyone else was thinking. We'll notify you when the ranking tournament starts. Aegon blinked at him like he was the strange one. Didn't you just say that those who want to enter the mage class should come onto the stage? He asked. The examiner froze. Wait. Are you saying you also intend to apply for the mage class? Yes, Aegon replied calmly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. So, can we start?
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
When the examination for the night class ended, many people wanted to take a break, expecting that they wouldn't receive any more shocks for the day. Unfortunately for them, they couldn't even get out of their seats before they were hit with the shock of the day. Aegon had just declared something unbelievable. They couldn't believe their ears. Hey, can you slap me? Really, I feel like my ears are broken. Sure. Hey, not that hard. Why did you use your full strength? Because you said so. Wait, why the hell are you manifesting that damned magic sphere? You motherfuckers. I'll pour hot oil in your ears. Unbelievable. I didn't think he'd be this ridiculous. What if he also has great talent in magic? Shut up. I'll get a heart attack. But he's the son of Lady Liliana, and I heard he inherited her perfect memory and intelligence. What if he also inherited her magic talent from her too? That was when everyone remembered something crucial. Aegon wasn't just an Augustus and Valeria. He was also the son of the strongest magic prodigy in the Empire. Liliana's song Word. All gazes immediately turned toward Aegon as the crowd collectively wondered how someone could inherit the best qualities of all his bloodlines. It was nothing short of a miracle. Really interesting, Raphael mumbled to himself. You're even more intriguing than I thought. Aegon felt the atmosphere in the stadium shift and belatedly realized something. Oh, they must be shocked. Choosing both the mage and knight pathways was a rarity, since both demanded tremendous time and effort. Trying to master both usually meant failure in both. Only a handful ever succeeded in walking both paths, but that alone wasn't enough to shock nobles who had seen many rare geniuses in their lives. In fact, some even expected Aegon to pursue 2 pathways. The reason they were truly shocked was because he was following all 3 pathways, something that had never happened before. Not a single person in recorded history had attempted to walk all 3 paths. It was considered a guaranteed road to ruin. Even following 2 pathways was already pushing one's limits. Everyone knew about Aegon's identity as a true Valeria, which meant he would definitely follow the soul pathway. So, his sudden declaration to also follow the mage pathway shook the entire audience to the core. Perhaps he just wants to try it. I mean, maybe he doesn't even have talent for it. Even if he has talent, he won't have enough time for all 3 pathways. His progress will be so slow that he'll die before achieving anything great. We can only wait and see. See? You're fucking blind, you monkey. Shut up. What would an ignorant fool like you know? I'm a blind seer. Yeah. The only thing you can see is your future, which is darker than the river of hell. Aegon tried to ignore the buzzing of the audience, but a few of their ridiculous conversations still reached his ears, making him utterly speechless. He shook his head and addressed the examiner. Can we start? Instead of answering, the man looked up toward the dean, who simply smiled and nodded. The examiner sighed, muttering under his breath, I'm not paid enough for this job. Aegon genuinely wanted to pat his back as he looked that pitiful, but he restrained himself and stepped aside. There, he closed his eyes and began thinking about other things. Before long, the platform began filling up again as the participants for the mage class walked on stage. Even the audience was fully focused now. Unlike the body pathway, those who follow the mage pathway and excel in it are truly special. Of course, they'd receive more attention, Aegon thought. This is the current reality for knights unless you reach higher ranks. Your efforts rarely earn respect. Still, the majority of the audience wasn't here for the other participants. They were waiting to see Aegon's results. After all, the exams tested not just one's innate talent, but also their discipline and hard work. Mage Pathway is probably the simplest, yet also the most complicated power system I've seen. It was indeed very simple, at least in theory. All one needed was sufficient mana and the ability to communicate with the world. Then, they could use themselves as the medium, mana as the fuel, and runes as the language to convey their will, and the world would respond accordingly. It was such a simple concept. Aegon opened his eyes and scanned the participants. As expected, the number was far smaller, only around 300 in total. He activated his mana sense and immediately detected numerous mana fluctuations around him. The participants were still beginners, unable to properly control their energy, so concealing their presence was impossible. That was why Aegon could roughly gauge the number of stars in their mana cores. There are a few good ones among them. The ranking tournament will be fun. The examiner cleared his throat and announced, "There will be 3 phases in this examination. In the first phase, we'll test the stage of your mana core and your affinity. In the second phase, your understanding of runes." He continued with a detailed explanation of the process, which only heightened the audience's excitement. "I know about your mana core, but what about your affinity?" Amon wondered, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "I can feel the sun, but there's also a potent cold aura within you." "What are you hiding, Aegon?" Once again, several obsidian blocks rose from the ground before the participants. They looked identical to the ones used in the night class exam, but Aegon knew they were different beneath the surface. There must be rune formations within them that analyze specific aspects. That's why they need different obsidian blocks. The examiner turned toward Aegon and said, "Aegon will start the first phase of the examination." Aegon nodded and walked toward the obsidian block. Just like before, he placed his hand on it and waited. A moment later, the spheres began to light up. Yes, spheres, not a sphere. Seeing the result, many people could only mumble to themselves, "I really should have expected this." Or, "Yeah, kill me now. I can't live in such an unfair world." "Sure, but give me your will first." "Fuck off, you opportunist. I'm just helping a friend over here." The stage of a pathway was usually represented by different names, like it was called rank for the body pathway and stars for the mage pathway. The glowing spheres represented the number of stars formed within one's mana core. The more the stars, the greater the mana capacity in the mana core. Normally, everyone was given a total of 12 years since their awakening to master the basics of the mage pathway and increase the number of stars in their mana core, which would eventually serve as the fuel for their spells. However, it was incredibly difficult to do so. Much of it depended on the rank of the mana circulation technique one practiced, as a higher rank technique would give them denser mana reserves and faster circulation speed. As the crowd watched the spheres light up, they weren't sure if they could even feel more shocked than they already were, so they simply waited for the final result. 1, 2, 3. They genuinely feared a fourth would light up at the top, which would have surely given some of them a heart attack. But fortunately, it didn't. That didn't make the scene any less impactful, though. They were still very much surprised. What do I even say? This man isn't human anymore. I finally understand why even there was such a reaction during his awakening. I don't even want to react anymore. I'm tired of this bullshit. Getting him on our side is going to be impossible. Unlike the others, the top echelon had entirely different thoughts. Even Gabriel, who was watching Aegon closely. His talent is too great, so it'll surely attract enemies who don't want him to exist, she thought, a faint smile forming on her lips. Even Aegon Valeria didn't survive despite being a Valerian. "You'll need my support, Aegon, and I shall protect you." He almost broke the record again, Raphael mused. "You're getting more and more tempting." Aegon, on the other hand, had no visible reaction to the results since he already knew about them. He quietly stepped back and let the others proceed with their testing. The crowd, having grown somewhat numb to constant shocks from him, didn't even say anything. The examiner simply continued with the next participants. As expected, only a handful managed to reach 2-star, while the majority remained stuck at 1 star or were disqualified altogether. Aegon was the only one with a 3-star mana core. 3-star is the genius level, not an otherworldly phenomenon, Aegon thought. But since I'm following 3 pathways at once, my progression naturally looks shocking. Well, it's mostly thanks to my mana circulation technique, anyway. He had spent most of his time learning the basics of the mage pathway, strengthening his body for the body cultivation pathway, and studying other things, so he had little time to cultivate his mana core. Not like he needed to. The only reason his mana core was this developed was because of the Mythical-Rank ice mana circulation technique. It truly lived up to its name as it elevated his mana core to 3-star without much training. Soon, the first part of Phase 1 came to an end, with the majority of participants managing to pass. After all, this wasn't the hardest part of the exam. Aegon scratched the back of his head, thinking, remind me not to do anything so eye-catching in front of everyone again, heck. It's annoying to be the center of attention. He could still feel countless gazes fixed on him, as if trying to peer straight into his soul. He felt like they were undressing him from their eyes alone. It was more irritating than flattering. You really have conflicting emotions, boss. Yes, but you'll have to get used to this. Things will only be like this more often in the future. You're simply too outstanding. I guess so. Might as well learn to enjoy it then. I'll need to contact Grandpa Sam. Him again? He's shameless, so he definitely knows a trick or two about this. Aegon smiled to himself, feeling like he had made a big decision. He thought he heard a defeated sigh from his shadows, but he ignored it as the second part of the first phase was beginning. Now, your affinities will be tested, the examiner announced. It won't affect your admission, but it will determine the resources allocated to you. Everyone nodded in understanding. The examiner snapped his fingers, and a new block rose from the platform. Unlike before, this one wasn't made of obsidian. It looked as if it had been cut from volcanic rock buried deep within a mountain. This is an alabaster stone, named after its creator. For thousands of years, it has recorded countless affinities. You simply need to place your hand on it, and it will reveal your affinity. Affinity, it was a term that signified which aspect of the world one's soul was attuned to. It could be something as common as an elemental affinity or something bizarre, a concept that governed the world alongside those very elements. But in the end, all of them were laws that governed existence, even the smallest, most seemingly insignificant ones. Zav has an affinity with the light element, while Callie has affinity with the concept of boost. Aegon recalled his friend's affinities. As for me, the examiner turned to Aegon again. Aegon, you'll start once more. Can I go last this time? Aegon asked, sounding a little hesitant for some reason. The examiner was puzzled, as were the others, but he didn't object. Aegon had already gone first in the previous round, so it was only fair. Then, Randy Orton, you're next. The young man stepped forward and placed his hand on stone. A moment later, glowing words in the common human language appeared above it. Push. You have an affinity with the concept of pushing. What's he going to do with that? Aegon wondered. The young man didn't seem upset about it, so perhaps it wasn't as useless as it sounded. There must be some spells related to it. Maybe he can create something like Almighty Push from that anime. Wait, that would actually be really OP. While Aegon was watching the other participants, the audience's attention was completely on him. Everyone had the same thought, or rather, the same question. Why did Aegon delay his test? What kind of affinity did he possess? The exams continued, but they were far more interesting now, as everyone was curious about the participants' affinities. After all, if someone had a good affinity, then these noble houses could invest in them, even if their talent was poor. And they certainly did find a few good ones, but most of them were ordinary. After all, while there was always a possibility that someone might awaken an affinity with some bizarre and powerful concept, most people would still end up with something normal. The common affinities were related to the elements. So many participants awakened affinities with fire, water, wind, light, shadow, and lightning. Some even awakened similar affinities linked to those elements like gale, which was basically a variation of wind in a way. Only a few had affinities with rare elements like sound, sand, and others. There were also participants with twin or multiple affinities, and they were instantly granted admission because those were the rules. Yet, the audience remained fixated on their seats as they waited for Aegon's turn. There were certainly some eye-catching participants, but all of them were overshadowed by Aegon's dazzling talent. If only they had participated any other year, they would have shined much brighter and attracted far more attention. Fortunately for the audience, the number of participants was small, so it didn't take long before everyone had been tested except for Aegon. "Aegon, it is your turn," the examiner said, noticing that Aegon was still hesitating. "I think it's better if I don't," Aegon said after thinking it over for a while. "You did say it doesn't matter what affinities one has for admission, right?" "Yes, but—" The examiner looked confused, as this was the first time someone had refused to test their affinity. There was no rule that forbade it, so he couldn't reject Aegon's decision outright. However, he also knew that everyone wanted to know Aegon's affinity, so he couldn't just accept it easily either. So, he raised his head to look for guidance, and found Amon smiling while staring directly at Aegon. "Do you really want to withdraw?" Amon asked. "If you have good affinities, you'll receive greater resource allotment." Aegon immediately understood his meaning. He had told the dean earlier that he intended to remain independent for as long as possible, and earning resources this way was certainly the best method. Sadly, there was a reason Aegon didn't want to reveal his affinities. "Yes, I'm fine with it," he said with a nod. "Are you perhaps scared?" Gabriel snorted at his words. "You have good talents in other areas, so perhaps you're afraid the world will find out you don't have any impressive affinities." "Your Highness surely knows how to joke." Aegon chuckled, then stared straight at her, his expression turning sharp. "I'd like to ask you something. Do you really see a coward in me?" Gabriel flinched slightly, momentarily forgetting how to respond. For some reason, those golden eyes reminded her of her grandfather, who was the most terrifying man she had ever met. She found it ridiculous that this young man actually reminded her of him, so she scoffed and said, "I don't have such good eyes. All I know is that I've heard the House Augustus is the definition of bravery." Then how could they have produced someone who doesn't even dare to show his affinity to the public? Raphael glanced at his sister and chuckled to himself. This idiotic sister can be really helpful sometimes. Many others had wanted to say something similar, but couldn't for obvious reasons, so they were quite pleased to see the princess taking that role for them. Of course, most of them knew it was just an act on the princess's part. Just as Raphael pretended to be kind and amiable, Gabriel often played the part of an arrogant fool. But in truth, she always thought things through before acting or speaking. "Now, what will you do?" Amon leaned back in his chair, amused as he watched the drama unfold. "I know it's a rage bait, but why am I still falling for it?" Aegon laughed lightly, surprising everyone. "Well, if that's what you want, then I'll give you exactly that." He turned toward the princess with a charming smile playing on his lips. Princess heard it correctly. The House Augustus is the definition of bravery. Not a single one of my predecessors was a coward, unlike certain people who just sit in their stone palaces and enjoy the freedom bought with the sacrifices of those brave soldiers. Everyone felt their hearts pound hard against their chests upon hearing those words. Every single thing Aegon said hit home. The House Augustus had always produced the most talented humans, but their numbers remained few for a simple reason. All of them were brave soldiers who gladly gave up everything to protect their homeland. That was why they were both respected and feared. Even the emperor himself had to bow his head in respect before their ancestors. That same blood flowed through Aegon's veins, so calling him a coward was a direct insult not only to him, but to the entire House Augustus. Those who had shared the same thoughts as the princess felt ashamed as they realized the weight of their words. Even the two royals were left speechless by his declaration. But Aegon didn't stop there. He raised his hand and pointed toward the sky, where the scar of the heavens divided the twilight sky in two. His grin widened. "Do you honestly believe the heavens bled just so I could gain a minor boost in my body and mage pathways that puts me slightly above my peers?" Really, it was the first time Aegon had truly been angry since arriving in this world. All because someone had insulted his family, something he took immense pride in. He could endure insults aimed at himself, but never those directed at his family. How laughable! His laughter made everyone realize just how foolish their assumptions had been. Indeed, Aegon might have been far above his peers, but it wasn't enough to cause the phenomenon that had occurred a decade ago. Then, what had been the reason for it? What truly happened back then? Let me show you the true reason why even the heavens burned on my awakening. Everyone in the audience could sense the anger in Aegon's voice, and his shadow could feel it too, but she didn't emerge. After all, her boss had already given her clear instructions. Don't bother. I know what I'm doing. It's not enough for you to take action. Aegon strolled forward and stopped before the testing stone. Under the heated gazes of the audience, he calmly placed his hand on the plane's surface. Let's see how good you really are. Nothing appeared on the stone, leaving everyone confused. They had expected something grand after his bold declaration, yet nothing happened at all. It was as if he didn't even possess an affinity. Many were puzzled by the situation, wondering if Aegon was truly lacking in this aspect. But it was difficult to accept that notion considering his other achievements and his confident declaration. Then, they heard a startled voice from the main seats. Wait, that's... Aemon couldn't even finish his sentence as his lips quivered and his hand slipped from the armrest. His eyes, magnified behind the monocle, trembled in disbelief. Just as everyone grew even more confused by the dean's reaction, something completely unexpected happened on the platform, something that shook every soul present. The ancient stone, which had endured thousands of years and recorded countless affinities without a single scratch, began to crack from top to bottom. With every passing second, the cracks deepened, spreading like lightning bolts across its surface. Then, before the stunned faces of the crowd, the testing stone exploded with a deafening boom, sending fragments and dust flying in every direction. The examiner and Aegon were the closest to the blast, yet both stood unharmed, protected by the defensive formations that also ensured no debris struck the audience. At that moment, silence blanketed the entire stadium. It was so quiet that one could even hear the faint current of air swirling through the shattered space. Then chaos erupted. What the fuck? Did the Academy put the wrong stone up there? Idiot. If it was the wrong one, then how did it work for everyone else? Then how do you explain the explosion? How the hell would I know? Do I look like a seer? Yeah? Didn't you once say you were a blind seer? Why don't you tell us what happened then? Oomph. My inner sage is awakening, and he says it happened because something exploded inside. I swear, I can't control my emotions after seeing this, and you're still spouting nonsense. I'll kill you. My inner sage says you'll become a solar priest and forgive me. Priest my ass. While the audience was losing their collective minds, the nobility and even the royalty weren't faring much better. They simply stared in disbelief as the dust settled and the remains of the shattered stone came into view. What is the meaning of this? Raphael's eyes widened as he stared at the destruction. No, what really happened here? This talent. He's too mysterious, Gabriel thought with a deep frown. He knew this would happen. That's why he played along with my provocation. But what exactly is your affinity, or perhaps affinities? Only a few people understood the truth of what had occurred, and one of them was Aemon. This is absurd, he thought, echoing what everyone else was feeling. The testing stone couldn't handle the number or quality of his affinities. That's impossible. An ancient artifact like that. As the dean of the Academy, Aemon was fully aware of that stone's capabilities and the immense endurance it possessed. Unless someone deliberately used destructive force, no one had ever been able to damage it. Aegon, you truly are the walking balance of this world, Aemon thought, his eyes glimmering as he smiled faintly. Truly fascinating. No one dared to speak directly to Aegon, but their thoughts were written all over their faces. Everyone knew that this single event would send shockwaves throughout the human domain. It wouldn't be wrong to say that the human with the greatest potential stood right here in the Academy, and his name was Aegon Valeria Augustus. Meanwhile, Aegon calmly scanned the crowd, his gaze eventually settling on Aemon. He spoke with an easy tone. I'm sorry, sir, for breaking the stone. But I did warn everyone beforehand, so technically, it isn't my fault. It's fine, Amon replied with a casual wave of his hand, his expression returning to its usual relaxed state. I was the one who insisted, so it's my responsibility. But if it can be bought, I'm willing to pay for it, Aegon said, glancing at the debris with a thoughtful look. I did destroy it after all. It's not something money can buy, Amon laughed. Anyway, I can roughly guess your results, so there's no need for you to test your affinities any further. Not that we have another testing stone left. It was then that Amon realized something. He knew this would happen. He knew he'd be provoked into taking the test, so he deliberately went last to ensure this exact outcome. Smart boy. Aegon smiled faintly at Amon's words and stepped down from the platform. He could feel countless questioning gazes fixed on his back, but he ignored them. Fortunately, no one dared to speak their thoughts aloud. You weren't that angry, Master. I was angry, but one thing Shio taught me well is to use my head even when I'm angry. Well, Chief certainly is good at that. She's always half angry, yet still manages to make the right decisions. Only you praise her that much. Aegon had read enough novels to know better than to fall for an obvious provocation. Still, he couldn't just back off after his family was insulted. That was why he took the test, because he knew the stone wouldn't be able to withstand the sheer number of affinities he had gathered over the years. It was simply impossible. He knew because he had already tried it once before. This event also put Gabriel in his list of people he disliked. Well, I'm getting bored of this now, Aegon thought as he glanced up at the sky. The tournament will probably be boring too. Forget it. He turned toward the examiner and asked before the next phase could begin, Sir, I'm admitted, right? He already knew the answer, but he asked for the audience's sake. You are. It was Amon who responded, prompting Aegon to look up toward him again. Then, can I leave? He asked, once again leaving everyone bewildered. What about the tournament and resources? Amon asked, his tone laced with amusement. I have my reasons, Aegon replied with a light shrug. As for resources, I'm sure you already know my answer, sir. Amon laughed softly and said, You're an interesting kid. I'm curious to see how your time in the academy. Then I hope I entertained you enough today. Aegon smiled. I'm sure I can find better words for what you did, but whatever you say, Amon replied. You may leave if you don't care about the tournament. Aegon had been waiting for those words. He nodded and turned his gaze toward Gabriel, who was still observing him silently. His smile faded as he said, I hope your highness doesn't speak so carelessly before other members of my family. It surely won't end well. Are you threatening me? Gabriel asked, her golden eyes narrowing. I'm merely advising you and telling you that I'm the calmest one among us. Aegon chuckled. I don't think I need to explain about the others, so I'll leave it at that. He wasn't lying. All the members of House Augustus were known for their fiery tempers, especially when it came to family. If Shio had been in his place, she would have punched the princess 10 times over without hesitation. And Arnold? He would have supported her actions completely because the Augustus family valued loyalty and kinship above all else. Gabriel was about to speak again when she suddenly stopped. A conflicted expression flickered across her face before she sighed softly. I apologize for my earlier words. Apology accepted, but please remember it next time, Aegon said with a polite smile before walking toward the exit, still feeling dozens upon dozens of powerful gazes following him. All of them were filled with questions, curiosity, and emotions he couldn't care to name, but none dared to approach or ask him anything. So, he simply ignored them and walked out of the stadium. This was who he was and how he had chosen to live his life. Life was short, and he wanted to enjoy every bit of it. If something became boring, he would simply move on and choose another path. This was how Aegon lived. He had no need for the things the world so desperately longed for, because he already had them all. Thanks, system. You really made my life great. Host doesn't need to say that so often. The system was designed to make your life easier. Whatever the case, I'm indebted to you, and I think I should express my gratitude regularly. You're the reason I can live so lavishly, after all. I see. Gratitude. Understood. The one thing Aegon never forgot was to sign in whenever he visited remarkable places, so of course he also signed in at the stadium. After all, so many powerful individuals had gathered there. Sadly, it seemed he had used up all his luck when he obtained the small fragment of the Twilight Domain. Ding! Rank 4 spell Fury of Blizzard acquired. It wasn't that the reward was bad, but Aegon had certainly expected more, especially since even Amon and the Royal Protectors were present. And why is it related to ice again? Well, in a place where so many people gather, things tend to get random. He didn't think much of it afterward and simply exited the stadium while whistling an unfamiliar tune. Just as he stepped out of the exit, he found two familiar faces waiting for him. "Don't want to see the tournament?" he asked, smiling at them. "I lost interest the moment you dropped out." Callie shrugged her shoulders. "What's the point of watching those weaklings fight each other? It'd just sour my mood if they declared someone else the winner when you're here," Xavier said, his tone filled with dissatisfaction. "There's no point in watching anymore." Aegon could only shake his head helplessly. Then, glancing at the grassy field around them, he asked, "So, we'll have to walk back home?" "I thought something like this would happen." Xavier smirked confidently and snapped his fingers. Callie and Aegon both stared at him, speechless at his little show since nothing happened. Xavier just stood there, his confident grin turning stiff in the awkward silence. "Jay, just wait a second. It'll happen. Trust me," Xavier stammered, taking a deep breath before snapping his fingers again, only for nothing to happen once more. This time, Aegon and Callie couldn't hold it in any longer. Laughter burst out of them like an explosion. Xavier's lips twitched at their laughter, and he shouted in frustration, "Come out!" Only then did a cyan-colored wagon emerge from the bushes, stopping right in front of the three. A beautifully carved crest of a blooming lotus above the moon was engraved on its surface. Upon seeing that, Callie's laughter died instantly, replaced by a conflicted expression. Aegon noticed it immediately, as he had been watching her closely ever since the wagon appeared. He recognized it instantly. How could he not? He was the one who had personally helped in its creation. It was a gift for someone dear to him. "What's going on with you, Callie?" He wondered silently before shifting his gaze to the wagon. Its wooden door slid open, revealing a glimpse of the luxurious and comfortable interior that looked more like a portable personal room than a carriage. From it stepped out a beautiful lady with a slender figure and long, cascading cyan hair that flowed down to her waist. Her gentle smile was warm enough to melt hearts, and the soft, elegant dress she wore seemed tailor-made to accentuate her grace. Her eyes immediately found Aegon, sparkling like stars as if she had just discovered a long-lost treasure. She leaped from the carriage with surprising speed, and before anyone could react, wrapped Aegon in a tight embrace. "Little Gon, it's been so long." Her bright voice was so full of joy that even Aegon couldn't help but smile, despite the fact that he was being squeezed half to death. "Big sis missed you so much. Luna, can you release me first?" Aegon pleaded helplessly with this self-proclaimed big sister of his. "Call me Big Sister first," Luna said, tightening her hold. "Big sis, can you release me now?" Aegon sighed in defeat, realizing there was no point in arguing with her. Even though Luna and Callie were of the same age, Aegon always treated the former like an older sister, while the latter was part of his peer group. He could have easily broken free from Luna's grip, but he never used his strength against friends or family. It was an unspoken rule of House Augustus. Luna's smile brightened even more. She practically beamed with joy just from hearing him call her that. She finally released him and asked eagerly, "Did you miss me?" "Who wouldn't miss you?" Aegon replied smoothly. "You're too wonderful not to." Luna giggled, pinched his cheeks playfully, just like she used to in their childhood, and said, "And here I thought you had finally developed a cold personality. But your slick tongue's still the same." "He should have used that tongue in the stadium," Xavier teased from the side. Those girls were already enchanted by his face. If he talked like this there, they'd have fainted on the spot. "Stop exaggerating," Aegon said, giving him a light kick. "And stop being jealous of my face. As if someone this handsome could ever be jealous of you." Xavier smirked and flicked his hair dramatically. Luna and Aegon exchanged a glance, then nodded in unison. "He's an idiot. He's a lost cause." "Ojai!" Xavier shouted in protest. Luna chuckled softly before turning her gaze to her right. Her expression softened, though her eyes carried a trace of complicated emotion as she looked at the face so similar to her own, yet completely opposite in expression. "It's been a while, Callie." "Yeah, been a while," Callie replied, avoiding her gaze. "I thought you were on a mission in Silverhand City." "I was, but how could I miss little Gon's exams?" Luna said warmly. "And he certainly gave me quite the spectacle. Can we talk later?" Xavier interrupted impatiently. "I'm starving. Let's go home first." At his words, Luna's smile froze slightly. She gave a brief side glance to Callie, whose face also shifted with an unreadable expression. Then, without another word, Callie turned toward the wagon and said briskly, "Yeah, let's go home first." Aegon, watching Luna carefully, noticed a flicker of emotion in her eyes, surprise mixed with joy, and grew even more curious about what had happened between the two sisters. It doesn't feel like they fought, Aegon thought. Maybe it was just an argument? Callie's acting really strange. As far as he remembered, Luna and Callie would always bicker over trivial things, especially about him calling them big sister. But this time, Callie didn't even react. That wasn't like her at all. When Xavier also climbed into the carriage, Aegon moved closer to Luna and whispered, "Are you two in an argument or something?" Luna stared at the wagon for a moment before shaking her head. "Not really. We've fought before, but has never damaged our relationship like this." She wasn't surprised that Aegon had noticed so quickly. It was obvious to anyone familiar with them that something was off, and she didn't mind confiding in him. "Can you think of anything that might have caused this?" Aegon asked, hoping for some clue. At his question, Luna smiled wryly. "If I knew, I'd have tried to fix it already. But I don't even know what's bothering her so much that she won't talk to me properly." "Really?" Aegon exclaimed, startled. "It's been months since we last talked," Luna admitted softly, sadness flickering in her eyes. "I haven't even stepped foot in her house. It's like there's this invisible wall between us that I just can't cross no matter what I do." She sighed and looked down. "If it weren't for you and Zav, I doubt she'd even talk to me now. I keep wondering if I did something unforgivable, something that made her hate me." "I can assure you she doesn't hate you," Aegon said firmly. "Believe me on that." "Then why?" That was the one question Luna couldn't answer, no matter how hard she tried. Aegon lightly bumped her shoulder and smiled. "Then we'll just find out together. She's struggling with something, so we just need to figure out what it is and help her through it. You know, it's supposed to be my job to solve your problems, not the other way around," Luna said, letting out a soft giggle. "My only problem right now is that my friends can't even communicate properly," Aegon replied with a shrug. "So fix that first." "Now that's a tall order, little Gon," Luna said with a small smile. "But I'll do it. I'll solve your problems." "Hey, are you two leaving me out of your secrets again?" Xavier's head popped out of the wagon window, his face full of mock outrage. "Sometimes I really envy his stupid brain," Luna muttered, her hand twitching as if itching to smack him. "Well, you know him better than I do," Aegon said, chuckling. "He knows what's going on. He's just pretending not to, so you two won't feel uncomfortable. He trusts his sisters to figure things out. Then he's even more of an idiot for trusting such incompetent sisters," Luna said, finally smacking Xavier's head and forcing him back inside. She also entered the wagon. Aegon watched the whole thing quietly, then followed her into the wagon, his thoughts deepening. These two seriously need a proper one-on-one talk. As the wagon began to move, Aegon leaned back and gazed out the window. His eyes drifted to the endless blue sky above. "How are you, El? I really miss you. You would have surely solved this easily." Out of 4 of his true friends, Aegon was reunited with 3 of them, even though there were some problems among them. So he was naturally reminded of their last friend who couldn't be with them. As he gazed at the sky through the window, thoughts of Alara invaded his mind. He knew she would have definitely found a solution to this problem and even solved it. She was like the brain of their little group. "Missing her?" Xavier asked, seeing his expression. Aegon just hummed in response. Unlike them, Alara couldn't freely roam around and adventure through the world with her friends. She was an elf, and not just any elf, but a royal elf. The royal elf family would never allow their daughter to enter the humans' territory. The Moonrise Kingdom was the only exception, and even there, she had to come with heavy security. That was the level of distrust between the humans and elves, which was quite valid considering the history between them, but also meant that Aegon wouldn't be able to meet her easily, especially now that he was in the Great Solar Empire. There was no way the elves would allow Alara to come here. However, these differences hadn't been able to break the bond they shared. In fact, it was even stronger now. "We can visit her once you become stronger," Xavier suggested. "The current situation is really a big problem. I've already decided to start my adventures from Slyvana," Aegon replied with a smile. "It will be my first destination." "Really?" Xavier exclaimed. That's actually a good idea." Aegon nodded and shifted his gaze towards the twins. While Callie was sitting silently, looking outside the window, Luna was busy staring at her gently and lovingly. It was unknown what made Callie uncomfortable, but she frowned and turned towards Aegon. "By the way, are you really going to let go of the princess like that?" "She wanted me to walk in her trap," Aegon said, as he once again looked outside the window. "And being angry at someone like her will just put me in a bad mood, and I'm not interested in ruining my mood for someone like her." "Really? You aren't going to take revenge on her?" Callie narrowed her eyes in suspicion, and even the others felt the same way. "I don't like that word, so no, I'm not taking revenge," Aegon said as he leaned back. "I'll just play a prank on her. That's all." Xavier suddenly felt chills as he shifted back and asked, "What are you planning?" "I'll just do the same to her what I did to you," Aegon grinned and said, making Xavier confused for a moment. Then, as if someone had shone light in his brain, his eyes widened and he hurriedly clutched his head. "No way. You're crazy. You seriously are considering that?" Luna asked, a little worried. "Is it really fine?" "It's fine. Completely fine." Callie's lips parted in a wide grin as she gave a thumbs up to Aegon. "It's the best plan. No one gets away after insulting our family, even if they are from the Imperial family. She wanted me to confront her directly, so I'm just going to do the opposite." Aegon shrugged lightly. "Though it means I'll have to damage my company's reputation a little." "You going to use that?" Xavier asked, also getting excited. "But don't worry. No way that arrogant princess is showing her face to the public after that, or even announce it." "Yes, people will make fun of her too," Luna nodded. "But little gone, there's another reason for this too, right? I really can't hide anything from you." Aegon sighed and answered. "Although I have the blood of Augustus, I don't really belong to the current Augustus family, so I don't have any rights to bring them any trouble." Luna smiled and nodded. She really should have expected such an answer from him. "I am using the name and identity because that is who I am, but I don't want to use the family I don't belong to." "It's Grandpa Arnold's family." Callie insisted on that fact. "And I'm sure you'll be angry if you don't use your family name, to be honest. Is my opal living here with that family?" His question left them speechless. "I don't like to burden people with my problems, especially if they're strangers," Aegon said as he looked outside. "They're strangers to me, so why should I drag them into my problems? I hate the fact that I can't even argue on that," Callie grumbled, and also looked away. "That's why I've decided to create something of my own," Aegon announced, surprising everyone there. "I don't hate relying on my family, but I also want to have something of my own on which my family can depend." "Do you have something in mind?" Luna asked, tilting her head sideways. "I have, but it'll take some time," Aegon nodded. "It's related to my company, though." He suddenly stopped as his expression hardened, and he raised his head, eyes staring at something distant. It was also then that a familiar voice entered his mind. "Boss, do you want me to handle them?" "Let me see them first." His friends noticed the sudden change in his expression and were going to ask something, but the sudden stopping of the wagon forced the words back in their mouths. "What happened?" Luna frowned and asked the driver. "We are being attacked, Your Highness. You can stay inside while I deal with them." "No, it's fine. I'm curious who is inviting death to their house." With that, Aegon opened the door and jumped out of the wagon, followed by the other three who were ready to fight, which was clear from their stance. Aegon gave a side glance at the top corner of the wagon that had turned black and thought, "They tried to explode the whole wagon first, huh?" Then he shifted his gaze to the front where a tall man covered in white bandages was standing, with 2 daggers shining in his hands. "You are going to wait?" Aegon asked as he took a step forward. It's a bad strategy for an assassin, you know. I just wanted to see the face of a Valerian before I put you to permanent sleep, the man grunted before raising his hands. And I have to say, I'm pretty disappointed. I can say the same. Aegon smirked, seeing the hologram before him. Rank 5 Knight. Over the decade, Aegon had earned many useless awards, but there were a few that stood out, the ones he considered top tier. One of them was a special function added to his system, the ability to analyze an opponent and instantly determine their stage. It had a few more functions, but he needed to study more to activate them. Rank 5 Knight. Just a rank 5 Knight? Aegon said, shaking his head slowly. Who's the idiot that sent you? You're more naive than I thought, the bandage man smirked, his tone dripping with mockery. Quite the same goes for you, Aegon scoffed, his eyes calmly scanning their surroundings. Are the preparations complete? You knew. A flicker of surprise flashed across the man's eyes, but he quickly regained composure. Doesn't matter. It's already done. In the very next moment, large glowing symbols rose from the ground, surrounding them as a transparent barrier enveloped the area, trapping everything inside a rune formation. Aegon's golden eyes darkened to a deeper hue as he muttered, I'm impressed a little. You even have a 7-knot formation, but it's quite useless, you know. How could Aegon not recognize it? He had poured countless hours into mastering the fundamentals of the mage pathway, and that naturally included a deep study of runes. The formation before him was one he knew all too well, a structure primarily used to sever connections between the inside and outside world. It had a thick, resilient outer shell and a flexible, weaker inner core, meaning it was far harder to break from the outside than from within. Seems like I'll have to give you some credit, the man sneered, raising his daggers. But I'll show you why this isn't useless. Aegon didn't even look at him. His gaze remained fixed on the corners of the barrier, as he spoke casually. When are you planning to come out? Do as he says and rise, my subordinates, the bandaged man shouted, spreading his arms wide. From a grassy plains around them, dozens of men emerged, stepping out of concealment. Each one was wrapped in different colored bandages, their weapons glinting under the twilight sky. The Carfaya group? Luna muttered in faint surprise as she summoned her staff. You really are insane. We have no more need to waste our time here, the bandaged man bellowed, dashing forward. Kill them. I'll take care of this hospital boy, Callie whispered under her breath and dashed forward as well. Boost! In the blink of an eye, the two collided in the middle of the field. The impact of their clash rang out with a metallic echo, sparks scattering in every direction. The bandaged man was pushed back slightly, while Callie remained firm, her expression unchanged. She raised her fist, clad in metal braces, and taunted, Come, little man. You're quite impressive, but that's it, the man growled, lunging at her again, his speed even faster than before. But Callie matched him effortlessly with a single word. Boost! Meanwhile, the other members of the Carfaya group charged at the remaining trio. Dozens of assassins surrounded them, but not a single one managed to reach their targets. Luna stood before Aegon, her staff raised high, a spell sphere of swirling water hovering at its tip. She slammed her staff down, summoning a massive surge of water that swept through the ground and pushed back their attackers. Almost all of them are knights, Aegon observed calmly, crossing his arms. And certainly weak ones. Aside from their leader, not a single one passes rank 3. What gave them the confidence to attack us? Xavier muttered, raising his hand and firing several beams of light toward the advancing men. As a 3-star mage, his normal attacks lacked the power to pierce their strengthened bodies, but that wasn't his intention anyway. He was merely creating an opening. By then, Luna had finished preparing her spell. She waved her staff forward and chanted, Water Prison. In the next instant, the water she had summoned earlier surged upward, morphing into thick chains that wrapped tightly around every enemy within range, trapping them completely. I didn't even get to do anything, Aegon muttered, watching the utter devastation unfold. It wasn't surprising, though. Luna was a 4-star mage. As long as no one got too close and she had time to cast, even a squad of rank 4 knights wouldn't stand a chance. These rank 3 knights didn't even qualify as warm-up material. Coupled with Xavier's support, it was only a matter of time before she subdued the entire group. Aegon didn't even need to draw his weapon. He turned his gaze toward the other battlefield, where Callie's blurred figure clashed continuously with the bandaged man. Sparks flew each time their weapons collided, but anyone watching could tell who had the upper hand. Her boost is seriously a broken ability, Aegon thought, momentarily entranced by the intensity of her movements. Then, suddenly, a chill crept down his spine, a sense of danger so sharp it almost made his skin crawl. He smiled faintly. "I was waiting for you." A dagger coated in a faint pink substance appeared behind him, slashing through the air with deadly precision. Aegon turned on his pivot, narrowly dodging it, though the blade continued its trajectory unnaturally, twisting mid-air to chase him again. "We're doing this the American way," Aegon muttered, smoothly dodging another strike, as if he could predict every move before it happened. He reached into his inventory and pulled out a compact, metallic object. The owner of the pink dagger, a man dressed entirely in black, his face covered, seemed to bend space itself as he instantly appeared before Aegon. His dagger gleamed inches from Aegon's eye, but Aegon remained perfectly calm. Just as the blade was about to strike, he whispered, "Shadow step." The dagger pierced through nothing but dark mist. Aegon reappeared right behind the man, a grin spreading across his face, and pressed the barrel of a pistol against the back of his target's head. "I told you," Aegon said, voice cool and sharp. "We're doing this the American way." The assassin had no idea what this strange weapon was, but his instincts screamed danger. He tried to activate his escape technique again, but it was already too late. With a thunderous boom, a projectile tore through his skull. Pain seared through his mind before everything went dark. Aegon exhaled lightly, blew away the faint trail of smoke rising from the pistol's barrel, and smiled. Game over. Everything happened so quickly that it didn't even feel real. Callie was still fighting with the bandaged man, and the other 2 siblings were occupied, so none of them even realized when Aegon had been attacked. By the time they turned toward him, the battle was already over. A man clad in black clothes lay motionless before Aegon, blood dripping steadily from the back of his head. "Are you all right?" Xavier asked, though his tone lacked any real concern, almost as if he already knew the answer. "Yes, but we gotta finish this quickly," Aegon replied, pocketing his gun. "They're both clones." "Both?" Luna caught on immediately, her sharp mind processing his words as she turned toward the restrained enemies. "Then let's check them later," Aegon interrupted, turning his gaze elsewhere. "We need to help Callie." Before he could finish, something slammed into the ground beside him with a thunderous crash. He turned his head to look and realized it was the bandaged man himself. The man's body was battered and broken, his bandages soaked red with blood. His face was a mangled mess, his nose shattered, leaving him nearly unrecognizable. "Right. She loves fighting too much," Aegon thought, his expression flat. And with her nonsensical affinity, this must have been a piece of cake. His gaze shifted toward the perpetrator of the man's current condition. Callie walked toward them, her steps slow and unhurried. Her voice was filled with disappointment as she spoke. "I thought you were strong." "I am strong," the bandaged man barked in anger despite his pitiful state. "It's you who's a monster. What kind of affinity is that?" Aegon could only shake his head helplessly. Callie's affinity truly was nonsensical, an affinity with the concept of boost. It was a bizarre and complex affinity, difficult to control and even harder to master, but Callie had somehow done it. Now, she could amplify her physical attributes multiple times over, making her one of the strongest knights of her rank. There were limits, of course, but she had a habit of breaking them. It was clear who the victor would be when she fought someone of the same level. "Quit pretending." Aegon kicked the bandaged man lightly and asked coldly, "Did you come here just to probe us, or is there someone waiting outside the barrier?" "Huh. It was nice meeting you, dragon boy." The man laughed, his blood pooling beneath him, staining the grass crimson. "You're certainly better than I imagined." "What are you talking about?" Xavier asked, frowning in confusion. Is he really a clone? Aegon nodded. I'm curious. How did you find out? The man asked, sounding genuinely intrigued. I don't recall letting anything slip. Blood. Aegon pointed at the red grass beneath them. It's too fake. And when I actually shot your other clone, the hit didn't feel right. You failed to replicate the reaction and damage properly. Small details, but you catch on fast, the bandaged man said, sounding somewhat impressed. Still, I didn't expect an Augustus to fight so crudely. Aegon instantly understood his meaning. The only reason he managed to dodge that assassination attempt at the last moment was because of Hecht, his loyal shadow, and his refined sixth sense. So, in truth, he didn't fight alone. What can I say? I was raised by people who were polar opposites, Aegon said with a grin, crouching down. And you seem to have a few misconceptions about my family. But that's fine. You'll meet them soon enough anyway. Huh, am I supposed to be scared? The bandaged man let out a broken laugh, his body trembling. Your family isn't all-powerful, Dragon Boy. Even House Valeria isn't. So what are you so arrogant about? It's more than enough to deal with the likes of you, Aegon replied calmly, standing up straight. I hope we don't meet again anytime soon. Oh, we will, the man sneered, his tone chilling. I'll be waiting for your precious life. Before Aegon could respond, the man's head suddenly detached from his body and rolled to the side. Yet, even in supposed death, his eyes moved and glanced at the barrier. What's this? Interesting. You're really more fascinating than I thought, the head muttered eerily. Why do you want to kill me anyway? Aegon asked, his tone filled with curiosity. Why me, in particular? And why should I tell you that? The man's separated head sneered. You only need to know that I'll kill you. Aegon was left speechless by the absurdity of the statement. He stared at the head, which had begun dissolving into mist, and finally said, Farewell. We will meet again, Dragon Boy. We won't. With that, the head, along with the blood and body, disintegrated completely into the wind. The other clone that had attacked Aegon vanished as well. Only the remaining subordinates, still bound by Luna's spell, remained on the battlefield. This was a mess, Xavier muttered, rubbing his temple. So, he just came to check on us? Pretty much, Aegon nodded. What about them? Luna asked, shifting her gaze toward the men still trapped within her water prison. If this was just an experiment, then, unlike the clones, these subordinates hadn't disappeared, which meant the bandaged man had deliberately abandoned them, which was quite suspicious to Aegon and others. Aegon frowned slightly before closing his eyes. When he opened them again, his right eyeball was glowing faintly, swirling with countless minute symbols that seemed to stretch into infinity. His gaze fell upon the unconscious subordinates, and a deep sigh escaped his lips. He closed his eyes once more, and when he reopened them, his irises had returned to normal. They were under mind control until a moment ago, Aegon explained, a faint chill rising around him. The sudden cutoff from the source knocked them unconscious. The guy had planned to use them as scapegoats, most likely. Despicable. Luna spat, disgust written across her face. He can't possibly be from the Carfaya group. You know about them? Xavier asked curiously. They took upon that name because of a burial tradition in the Carfaya kingdom, Luna nodded. They wrapped their deceased family members in sacred bandages before burial. It's meant to protect their souls in the afterlife. So he's using that to conceal his real identity, Aegon said. Hecht's words made sense, but Aegon was still a little worried. The bandaged man's attitude, his complete lack of fear toward Aegon's background meant he either possessed terrifying power or had someone powerful backing him. And the fact that he could create 2 rank 5 clones just to probe him only made the situation more concerning. He trusted the Red Veil, but that didn't stop the unease in his chest. Trust me on this, boss. Then, I'll put them on this. Aegon finally gave in. But only if Shio leads the operation. I don't want to disturb her, but if I don't tell her about something this significant, she'll eat me alive later. I can see it happening. But rest assured, boss, if I'm not there, I don't trust the others to remain civil. Chief's presence is necessary for this mission. Aegon hummed softly as he watched the fragments of the barrier dissolve into the air. With its source gone, the formation had lost its fuel and was now crumbling apart. Callie had been lost in thought, but when the barrier finally vanished completely, her eyes widened and chills ran down her spine. She wasn't the only one. The twins, Luna and Xavier, both froze with the same uneasy realization. What surrounded them was not the open grassland they expected, but a towering wall of darkness that devoured even the faint twilight above. The colossal wall surrounded them from all sides, its shadowy surface writhing as countless fangs materialized within, slowly creeping closer like a monstrous maw closing in. "What the hell are you guys doing?" Aegon asked, though his tone carried a mix of amusement and exasperation. "The enemy's already gone. It was just a clone. Disperse your forms and come here." Slowly, the shadowy wall disintegrated, melting away into the ground as around 50 shadowy figures emerged, each one exuding an oppressive aura. Though they had no visible eyes, Aegon could feel their deadly gazes fixed upon him. One of them slid forward and knelt, his form solidifying slightly as a deep, rumbling voice filled the air. "I apologize for my negligence, boss. I allowed an insect to approach you." "Skip the formalities." Aegon waved dismissively, pocketing one hand while the other gestured casually. "You know I don't like them. Also, I wasn't in any real danger. Are you all forgetting that Heck's still with me?" His words reminded them of their leader, the one who had also summoned them here, on Aegon's behalf. Aegon had expected a trap waiting for them outside the barrier, so he called them in advance just in case. Unlike his dear Aunt Shio, Aegon was extremely cautious about anything that could endanger his life. He cherished it too much to take such risks. Dying once had been enough. Now he always made sure he had countermeasures ready for every possible situation. Only after hearing his words did the shadows relax slightly, though their menacing presence still lingered. Their anger hadn't faded in the slightest. Every one of them had sworn their loyalty to Aegon, to protect him even at the cost of their lives. Now that someone had actually dared to target him, how could they remain calm? They were barely restraining themselves from slaughtering whoever had plotted this attack. "All right, listen up." Aegon clapped his hands sharply. He stopped mid-sentence when he felt something vibrating in his pocket. Pulling it out, he revealed a small jade stone etched with intricate runes, the exterior polished to a mirror sheen. He sighed and infused a bit of mana into it. Immediately, a high-pitched voice filled with panic and fury erupted from within. "How are you? Where are you? Are you fine? Are you bleeding? Is anyone near you? Let me talk to them. Where's Hecht? I need to speak to her too. Speak something, damn it." Aegon stared at the communication stone in silence. His friends merely nodded, unfazed as they had already expected this reaction. Even his shadow, who usually feared nothing, seemed to tremble slightly hearing that voice. He waited patiently until Shio ran out of breath. Only then did he speak. "I'll talk if you actually let me say something, Shio." "Aegon, I'm fine," he said calmly. "You can put your heart back in its place. I didn't even get a scratch, so stop worrying yourself sick." "How can I not? The moment I heard you were attacked and trapped inside a barrier, I already left the city. I'm on my way to Dusk City right now. I want to see who has the gall to even think of touching you." Aegon's eyes flicked toward Jason, who was still kneeling before him. The man quickly bowed lower, explaining, "I'm sorry, boss, but it was Chief's order to inform her immediately if anything like this happened." "Don't you dare blame them." Shio's voice snapped through the jade stone. "If they hadn't told me, were you planning to hide this from me?" The barrier had severed communication, so Hecht couldn't contact Shio directly. However, the Red Veil shared a unique bond. They could transmit messages through each other's shadows. That was how Hecht had managed to reach Jason so quickly. "Of course not," Aegon denied instantly. "I just wanted to be the one to tell you myself, since I knew you'd react like this. Now calm down and take a few deep breaths." "Fine. I'm breathing. But are you really fine?" "He's fine, Aunt." Luna stepped forward with a reassuring smile. Callie joined in, saying, "I was with him the whole time, Aunt. I almost forgot my nieces were there too." "Good job, you too. I'll treat you both to whatever meal you want when I get there." "Aunt, I was protecting him too." Xavier piped up eagerly at the mention of food, his hand raised like a child seeking attention. Everyone turned to stare at him blankly, their expressions unified in disbelief at his shameless words. "Zav, don't make me disown you," Callie said bluntly. "Little brother, lying isn't a good habit," Luna added, patting his head pityingly. "You too," Xavier groaned, clutching his chest as if he was having a heart attack. "So an assassination attempt is supposed to lead to this kind of nonsense?" Aegon rolled his eyes and snatched the communication stone back. "Shio, I need you here," he said, his tone turning serious. "I want you to find whoever did this. It's some idiot from the Spider Syndicate. You already found them?" "How?" Aegon asked, blinking. "Leave that to me. I'll make sure that Fool learns exactly who they messed with this time." The one Aegon trusted the most in this world was Shio, so he naturally believed her words. But the question was, how did she find out so quickly? They had just defeated their enemy, after all. Still, he decided not to ask about it for now. Instead, he asked something else. "Can you take some of my construction team with you?" "Huh? Them? No. They're supposed to be protecting you, so they should just focus on that." As Aegon looked at the shadows, he could feel their frustration and agitation. If he really didn't allow them to do this, they might actually do something crazy. "Shio, Hecht is with me, and I can't even bring them along because of the Academy. It's better you take them away on your mission," Aegon pleaded. Now, how was it possible that Shio would say no to her Aegon? "Fine. Send Jason and Santiago. They know who to bring along, so I'll just take those two groups with me. That's more than enough for this mission." Those who weren't going with Shio felt down, and even Aegon could feel it. So he added after Shio, "Don't be so down. I also need protection here, after all. What if this was his plan all along? He could lure you away and then come at me full force." That was enough to wake them up from their thoughts as their presence grew more frightening, and a low, chilling voice sounded from the tallest shadow. "They will drown in their own blood if they dare to even get near you. See? I need you guys here, so don't make that sad face," Aegon said and waved his hand. "Now go do your thing." Swiftly, the shadows dropped down on the ground and disappeared as if they had never existed in the first place. "Then, take care of yourself and inform me if something happens." Just like how Aegon trusted Shio the most, the same went for her. She knew Aegon was telling the truth when he said he was fine. They didn't share a relationship where they told lies to comfort each other. Shio didn't raise Aegon like that. "Inform me too if you discover something. I'm quite curious why I suddenly have people coming for my head." Aegon smiled and said, "They were always there. It's just that none of them ever reached you because of Dad. But now that you're out of his presence, they began to target you. Still, it's suspicious how they attacked you in plain daylight. I'll investigate that first. Be careful." Aegon knew she wouldn't listen to him, but he still said it. "I'll see the situation first and decide. I'm cutting off the connection now. Bye." Aegon then shifted his focus to the tied-up man and said, "Let's hand them over to the city guards. They can find their identities and send them back to their homes." "But what if they're also colluding with that guy?" Callie asked, distrustful as ever. "The chances of that happening are quite low, but we'll just have to see." Aegon nodded, as he had already thought of that. "Besides, the other option for us is to bring them ourselves. And I'm sure no one is looking forward to that. You can leave that to me." Aegon almost jumped out of his skin hearing that eerie voice behind him and hurriedly turned around, feeling apprehensive as this was the first time his sixth sense didn't work. No, it did work. I can feel it tingling, but it's already too late. Fortunately, he knew the man. Otherwise, he would have thought their enemies had attacked again. From the corner of his eyes, he noticed how even his friends had the same reaction. Amon adjusted his monocle and said, with his classic warm smile plastered on his face, "I noticed the formation of a barrier, and guess what? A surprise was waiting for me." He turned towards Callie and said, "You're really an excellent student. Why don't you form a house yourself?" "I don't want to," Callie replied bluntly, but still kept her tone respectful. "Unfortunate, but understandable. Continue with your hunting then," Amon said, then turned towards Aegon again. "I'll send them back to their family, so you can leave. After all, you need to come to the academy tomorrow." Aegon narrowed his eyes in suspicion and asked after a moment of hesitation, "Did you do this to test me, or something?" Haha, I have better ways to test you. Amon laughed, taking no offense at all. This has to be the worst of them. After being pointed out, Aegon scratched his cheek in embarrassment as he realized how dumb his question was. He was just a little confused since Amon's timing and everything was too perfect, and he didn't like that creepy smile of his. It was as if Aemon was scheming every second. A shrewd person, that was Aegon's impression of him, aside from the fact that he was very strong. Then, I'll be taking my leave. I still have many candidates to watch. Aemon smiled and adjusted his monocle again. That single motion made the chained people disappear completely. And I'll be taking them with me. With that said, he smiled at them once again and covered his face. Wherever his hand passed, his body disappeared as if he was blanketing his existence into nothingness. Left alone on the battlefield, the four of them looked at each other before they decided to continue their short journey back home. As they sat inside the wagon, Xavier asked, "Dean is really suspicious." "But he's not the culprit," Aegon said. "He isn't this stupid." "Yes," Callie also agreed. "But he's creepy." "Then who do you think did this?" "The princess?" Xavier asked again. Aegon did kind of offend her in the stadium. "She just pretends to be a fool, but she isn't one," Luna answered instead of Aegon. "She wouldn't pull a stunt like this. It's likely someone else. I'm willing to believe that the prince did this more than the princess, to be honest, but I know he didn't either," Aegon said in agreement. "So, it's likely some old enemy of my family. So, what do we do now?" "Eat. A/N. I know I said the novel will be lighthearted, but I couldn't skip this one. Although it isn't anything dark, but it's also not lighthearted." While Aegon was returning to Callie's home, another spectacle was taking place in other part of Dusk City. In the western borough of Dusk City stood a tall tower of 20 stories. It was one of the tallest towers in the city, as most buildings were kept shorter to fit better within the city's protective barrier. This alone signified the status of the tower's owners. Tudor Express. Everyone in Dusk City knew this name, and the plaque hung proudly at the top of the 20-story building, marking it as one of the biggest distribution companies in the entire empire. From mundane goods to magical artifacts, they had their hands in every industry and shared an influential status, even in a large and bustling city like Dusk City. The building served as their headquarters, and currently, all the heads of the company had gathered on the top floor. It was a spacious room with a pristine white interior that dominated the atmosphere, reflecting elegance and cold authority. At the center, a total of 21 people, men and women of middle age, sat around a long oval table, their heads lowered and their bodies trembling uncontrollably. A single sprout of a flower was growing on each of their heads, and even the slightest movement of that sprout made their trembling worse. They didn't dare to move, yet their bodies wouldn't obey them. Even so, not one of them dared to look at the woman seated at the head of the table. An elegant woman with flowing snow-white hair sat in the main seat. Her exquisite face could topple kingdoms with its beauty alone, yet it was completely devoid of emotion. Even her crimson-red eyes, which slowly scanned every single person in the room, held no trace of feeling whatsoever. Anyone who tried to peer deep into those eyes would see nothing but endless blankness. She was the very source of their terror. The woman twirled the wine glass in her hand and asked in a flat, emotionless voice, "Tell me honestly, who was the one who proposed this idea?" We were forced." One of the men mustered up some courage and spoke. "He could have killed us all otherwise. And yet I'm about to do the same," the woman said languidly, shifting her gaze toward him. "And I did ask you to be honest, didn't I?" They all flinched at her words. Her tone wasn't threatening in the slightest. It carried no emotion at all, yet it sent chills down their spines. It felt as if they were standing before the goddess of death herself, receiving her judgment, and all they could do was wait for the inevitable. They had sworn to cover for each other, even in the worst of situations, but now their resolve was crumbling like sand beneath her blank, merciless gaze. A woman who appeared to be the youngest among them collapsed to her knees. The sprout on her head grew faster as she did, but she still lowered her head and pleaded, her voice trembling with fear. "It was their greed. Lady Liliana. I did my best to persuade them not to take the deal, but they ignored me because I'm the youngest. Please spare me. I only recently joined and don't know anything. I'm an idiot. She didn't feel even a shred of shame in calling herself such things. At this moment, all she wanted was to survive. She could feel her life slipping away with every passing second, and the sheer terror was overwhelming. She knew the woman before her well enough to understand that Liliana wouldn't think twice before taking their lives. So she would do anything, even say anything, to stay alive. Why you? Don't throw us into the pit just to save yourself. Lady Liliana, don't listen to her. She's the one who brought the bandaged man to us and proposed the idea. Yes, it's all her fault. Once the secret was out, no one hesitated to turn on each other. They betrayed their comrades without pause, all in a desperate attempt to buy even a fleeting chance at survival, or at least a painless death, as some of them were already sure of their death. Liliana continued to stare at them for a while, before muttering softly, "How troublesome. Did you even know who he was targeting? Did you have any idea that you were helping him go after my son?" The instant her words fell, everyone felt their blood turn cold. For a moment, not one of them could even breathe as the truth settled in. They had wondered why Liliana was targeting them with such intensity, assuming it was because she held some old grudge against the bandaged man. Who could have known they were actually digging their own graves by targeting her son? The bandaged man had only told them that he was after a small noble's son, so they didn't ask questions. The benefits were too enticing to ignore. If any of them had known that his true target was Liliana's son, not even in their wildest dreams would they have dared to assist him. Unfortunately for them, they had already crossed the bridge, and now there was no turning back. "Oh, Lady Liliana, we really had no clue." Their desperate pleas fell flat like cold water spilling from an overturned bucket, for there wasn't a single change in Liliana's expression. Her face remained as blank as ever. "Last question." She paused for a moment before taking a sip of her wine. "Actually, never mind. I shall take the answers myself. Since you've already chosen your future, I'll help you reach it. Oh, Lady Liliana, please have mercy." By then, Liliana had already stood up from her seat and walked toward the window, completely ignoring the chaos behind her. A figure suddenly morphed out of thin air and stood silently behind Liliana, head lowered in shame. "You failed." Her flat tone made the figure shiver violently. "I gave you a single task, and you couldn't even accomplish that." The figure dropped to their knees, and a soft feminine voice rang out, trembling, "I will accept any punishment." "What?" That was Liliana's only question, yet the figure immediately understood. "The War Empress was with the young master the entire time," the woman explained. "If I had gotten any closer, she might have detected me. I kept my distance to avoid exposing myself, and that's why this happened. Please, punish me for my negligence, mistress." Claire had been with Liliana for more than 20 years, so it wasn't wrong to say that the woman before her had practically raised her. She respected her deeply and had long sworn her loyalty to her. The decision to follow Liliana to the ends of the world was something she made a long time ago. Yet, the same Liliana had left her after the incident 15 years ago, and Claire couldn't even bring herself to blame her for it. That single incident had changed everything. As she heard that emotionless voice now, her heart felt as though it was being pierced by thousands of blades. Liliana was never an emotional person, far from actually, but she had still shown traces of emotion back then. But now, only a hollow shell of a person remained. Even the faint emotions she used to display had completely faded after that incident. Nonetheless, there were still a few things that hadn't changed. Her motherly love for her children still remained, even in this empty husk. A few weeks ago, Liliana had appeared on her doorstep after so many years of disappearance. Her face was the same, flawless and beautiful, but those eyes, they were so unfamiliar to Claire now. Her only request to Claire had been to protect her youngest son, the one who had never even seen the face of his mother. How could Claire refuse something like that? That was why she had been keeping an eye on Aegon ever since he entered the great solar empire. However, She had detected a fearsome presence in the shadows and chose to keep her distance. Who would have thought it would lead to an attack before she could even do anything about it? Although everything had ended well, Claire still felt as though she had failed to uphold her promise to Liliana. That was why she was willing to accept any punishment. Heck, huh? I did hear that Shio gave the red veil to Aegon, so it's not surprising. If she's with him, he'll be safe, Liliana said, her voice still monotonous and devoid of feeling. But you will continue to protect him. I will do it even if it costs my life, Claire declared instantly. You are useless if it reaches a situation where you have to sacrifice yourself. Claire pursed her lips tightly. She wanted to say something to Liliana, but she kept it buried inside her heart. I believe Shio is already on her way, Liliana said as she picked up another wine glass. So, we can withdraw from this matter. You just need to stay around him. Mistress, don't we need to find the culprit? He clearly has powerful backing, Claire asked, her tone hesitant but serious. What if he tries something worse next time? Then you will be there to protect him. Not only that, Hecht is also with him, Liliana replied calmly. As for pursuing him, there's no need. Shio will be more than enough. And if I interfere, she'll just throw tantrums, so let her handle it. Claire was speechless. This was one of the very few times she had seen Liliana giving in to someone. All because she might throw tantrums? Was she a child? She'll always be a child to me, Liliana replied as though she had read Claire's thoughts. This matter is settled. Now, tell me if you encountered any of Art's men. I found out that his father had made arrangements so that he doesn't get close to young master in any way. So I didn't find anyone, Claire said calmly. He's still angry, Liliana muttered, and for a brief second, Claire could have sworn she heard sadness and disappointment in her tone. Why am I allowed then? Perhaps he really doesn't blame you for what happened back then. Claire tried to comfort her. It truly pained her to see Liliana like this. He doesn't, Liliana said with certainty. Then she paused and asked, How's my son? Brilliant and intelligent, just like you, Claire said with a faint smile. He analyzed the entire situation so calmly that even I was unnerved. He acted on his plans precisely and even prepared for outcomes that didn't happen. Cautiousness. Seems like he's the outlier among all of us, Liliana said, a soft smile appearing on her lips, as though she could picture the scene before her. Was he helped by his friends? Yes. All of them stood forward to protect him without hesitation, Claire replied. He has great friends. Truly an outlier, Liliana murmured as she waved her hand. Two glowing screens formed in midair before her, displaying footage of two individuals. Both were engaged in intense battles, so their faces weren't entirely visible, but their gender and demeanor were clear. The first was a handsome man clad in tight silver armor, his jet-black eyes scanning the battlefield calmly as he slaughtered dozens of demons within minutes. He didn't speak a word, letting his sword do all the talking. The other was a young woman wearing leather armor that gleamed faintly under the sunlight. Though her shouts couldn't be heard from the projection, the way her face contorted and her mouth moved was enough to reveal her fiery personality. He's better than my other two silly kids at getting good friends, at least, Liliana said softly, caressing the screens as if she were trying to pass her warmth to those two figures. He grew up just fine. She felt conflicted as she looked at them, as she was reminded of her failures once again. Because of how she was, her first two children had turned out the way they did, and the third one, raised by someone else, had grown up so well. She didn't think her first two children had any major faults, but they were certainly affected by her presence in their lives. Mistress, you also raised me, Claire quickly said. You're not a bad mother. Not at all. It's fine. I don't live in delusions or self-pity, Liliana replied calmly as ever. I know what I am and what I've done. I don't run from consequences. I face them. She turned around, her white hair swaying slightly, and said, Send the flowers to Shio and then protect Aegon from the shadows. I have some matters to settle before I meet him. Claire nodded in understanding and glanced at the table, where skeletons now sat in place of all those once lively people. On top of their skulls, beautiful red lilies swayed gently, almost as if they were dancing in joy. She gulped in fear. People really forgot who Liliana was simply because she rarely fought herself. But this was one of the many reasons she was feared even on the battlefield. The red lily blossomed upon Liliana's enemies. Aegon had made plans to eat outside since he was curious about the cuisine of the Empire, but Callie ended up dragging them back to her home. Initially, she was hesitant about taking them there, but when the talk shifted to eating in a restaurant, she suddenly became enthusiastic about homemade food. Although Aegon got the feeling that she didn't say that because of the food itself, he didn't point it out and simply followed her home. Along the way, he felt a gaze fixed on him and frowned. "Heck, do you sense something?" "No, boss." "Is something the matter?" "No, it's fine," Aegon replied, choosing to ignore it for the time being. Soon, he felt the gaze fade away. It had only lasted a couple of seconds, but left him uneasy. The only good thing about it was that he didn't detect any hostility, only curiosity. Weird. Did that guy come to check again? The moment Luna stepped inside the house, her eyes flickered around every corner before she smiled in delight. Once she was done inspecting, she said, "This is really good." "I doubt Callie chose this," Aegon said as he stepped inside and walked straight to the kitchen. "Hey, I also have good taste," Callie protested weakly, even though she knew well that her taste was terrible in most things. "Stop lying to yourself. It isn't something to be proud of," Xavier said, patting her back, only to earn a smack and a scowl from his sister. "Don't act like you're some sage of wisdom with that face. It's like watching a frog spout nonsense." Aegon ignored their banter and started preparing a quick meal after washing his hands. All the while, he kept an eye on Callie, trying to understand the current her better. She's talking more to avoid the awkwardness between her and Luna. And that idiot Zav is helping her. In normal situations, his brain works at the speed of a snail, but now he's suddenly a Gale strip horse. He shook his head and began cutting the potatoes. Just then, a pair of fair hands entered his vision and snatched the cutting board and knife from him. Without even looking, he knew who it was. Luna was always this considerate. She couldn't stand by idly while someone else worked for her. "What do I do?" she asked softly, holding back her emotions. This was supposed to be her home, a place filled with warmth, yet for some reason, all she felt now was coldness. "Nothing for now. She won't open up, so we'll have to do something ourselves, but I don't want to pressure her," he replied. "Let's just eat for now." Luna only hummed in acknowledgement. As Aegon continued cooking, his eyes fell on a bowl filled with green plums. He absent-mindedly picked one up and tossed it into his mouth, only to immediately regret it. His face twisted, and he shivered slightly at the intense sourness. But when he noticed Luna approaching, he composed himself despite feeling like throwing up all the plums in the bowl. He even chewed one more plum and then offered them to Luna with a calm look. "Have some. They're good." Luna raised an eyebrow, clearly suspicious, but still took one and bit into it, only to cringe hard as her whole body tensed up. Just as she was about to hurl insults at Aegon, she saw Callie and Xavier coming over and quickly fixed her expression. "What are you guys eating?" Xavier asked, practically jumping over the windowsill, but Aegon's quick kick sent him back to his place. "Plums. They're super tasty," Aegon said, offering the bowl while casually taking another bite. "Do you take us for idiots?" Callie asked, pointing at the plums. "They're too green and obviously sour. I bought them by mistake." "Nah, they ripened up. They taste delicious. Trust me," Aegon said with a smirk. "Well, it's your loss if you don't want to eat. We'll enjoy them ourselves." "They're good," Luna added, taking another bite to play along. "Really? Then don't hog them all," Xavier said excitedly, grabbing 3 plums at once. Aegon and Luna exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. The next moment, Xavier popped all 3 plums into his mouth simultaneously and closed his eyes. He froze for a brief moment before a strange moan escaped his lips. This is heavenly. Give me more." Callie stared at the blissful expressions on their faces, suspicion clear in her eyes. But despite her doubts, she found herself tempted. Now that she looked closely, the plums didn't look that bad. Hesitantly, she stretched her hand, picked up 1 plum, and took a bite. The next moment, all 4 of them rushed to the basin and spat everything out, washing their mouths repeatedly as the unbearable sourness clung to their tongues. That was how bad the plums were. Callie chugged down a full glass of water before glaring at Aegon. "It was you, wasn't it?" "What? I'm innocent," Aegon said, avoiding her eyes. "You." Callie pointed at the others, who were also busy cleaning their tongues. "You all played me and made me eat those horrible things." "It's your fault to begin with," Xavier retorted quickly. "Who told you to buy those plums?" "It was a mistake." "Then eat your mistake. Don't make me spank your little brother." Xavier instantly hid behind Aegon, who was trying and failing hard to suppress his laughter. The moment he saw Callie's furious face, he burst out laughing. The other two joined in, laughing at each other's misery. Even Callie couldn't stay angry for long and eventually laughed with them. After that, the four of them had dinner together, and it turned out to be far more peaceful than any of them expected. Callie even seemed to have relaxed, no longer minding Luna's presence. Once the meal was done, Xavier and Callie were assigned the task of cleaning the dishes while Aegon and Luna relaxed in the hall. "Thank you." Aegon turned around to see Luna smiling softly. Her gentle, loving expression was one he had grown all too familiar with. "Say that again, and I won't help you," Aegon said nonchalantly as he stood up. "Anyway, I'm heading back to my room. Don't disturb me unless it's important." He had already wasted several days without practice, so now he wanted to return to the world of magic. There were many things he wanted to test, and also a new spell he needed to examine. Once he was inside his room, Aegon spent a few minutes trying to calm himself through meditation. While practicing magic, it was always best to have a clear mind, as that boosted efficiency and also lowered the risk of backlashes. When his mind finally cleared, his eyes snapped open. He then clicked his fingers, and a hologram only he could see formed before him. In a deep blue color, it displayed a complex diagram made up of several spheres overlapping around a single dense sphere at the center. Complicated 3D symbols were engraved on every layer of the sphere, and some of them even seemed to be penetrating the very fabric of space and time, and Aegon knew that was exactly the case. The higher-ranked runes interacted with the foundation of existence itself, so they were always deeply connected to the fabric of space. "Runes! So beautiful!" Aegon muttered softly as he raised his hand to touch the hologram. Of course, his hand passed right through it. The hologram was nothing but an illusion cast by the system to help him understand the spell better. It was the spell sphere of the rank 4 spell, Fury of Blizzard, the one he had recently acquired from the system. He focused on the runes while recalling all the information about them, as he always did before practicing, so he wouldn't forget anything. Runes. They were the most important part of the power system governing this world, a sacred language used to communicate directly with the world itself. That was the reason for their utmost importance. Magic was simple in concept, yet impossibly complex in execution, all because of these mysterious symbols. First is securing the fuel. The fuel was mana, the raw essence of the world. One needed to awaken a mana core and open mana circuits, then absorb atmospheric mana and refine it to match the body's essence while it still retained the world's natural properties. Raw mana could be dangerous even for mages, after all. The mana circuits served as the veins through which one circulated mana. If someone allowed raw mana, or even refined mana, to leak uncontrollably into their body, it could cause severe damage. This was the easiest part of becoming a mage. Once the fuel is secured, we prepare the medium. The body was the medium through which one performed spells. It served as the foundation upon which a great tower was built, though its overall importance was relatively low. One just needed to channel small amounts of refined mana into their body until it became accustomed to the mana. It was dangerous, yes, but still considered a relatively easy process. Of course, this didn't make the body physically stronger. All it did was make it more suitable for being used as a medium. Once the fuel and the body are ready, we move on to the main part, which is learning the language of the world. What was magic truly? At its core, it was simply asking the world to do one's bidding. But in order to do that, One needed a way to communicate with the world, and there were very few ways to achieve that. The most widely used and accepted method was through the use of a language that even the world itself could understand. Runes, a vast and intricate set of symbols collectively known as the language of the world. Mages devoted their lives to learning as much of this language as they could, but no one had ever succeeded in mastering it completely, and for two reasons. The first reason was simple. The language was far too vast and complex. It was impossible to learn all of it within a single lifetime. Even if someone somehow managed to do that, new runes would still be discovered from time to time. The second reason lay in the world itself. The world wasn't a conscious being, nor did it possess a will, but it had something akin to a subconscious, or at least that's what every mage believed. It would be crazy if I'm just living inside a sleeping god or something. That subconscious of the world didn't like being ordered around. It passively resisted and suppressed the rune language. Even if one managed to learn it, they would start to forget it soon after unless they actively reinforced their memory. This suppression was so strong that even Aegon, with his perfect memory, struggled to retain all the information about the rune language. It was as if his perfect memory was constantly battling against an invisible force, trying to erase all traces of the runes from his mind. That was why he made it a habit to revise his knowledge of runes before every practice session, to ensure he remembered everything clearly. Of course, he had to work less than most because of his perfect memory and universal language. Just as the world tried to erase knowledge of the rune language, it also exerted pressure on anyone trying to learn it. But that wasn't much of a problem for Aegon, who possessed the universal language skill. Although the world still resisted, he could recognize every rune at a glance. The real problem came after that, as he would forget them almost instantly. It took an enormous amount of mental focus and energy to remember the runes for longer periods. However, his deeper understanding of the rune language allowed him to learn spells far faster than others, and even create new ones. That fact alone always filled him with joy. After all, with magic, practically everything was possible in this world. But one doesn't need to learn all the runes, as long as they manage to master the ones required for their spells. Still, knowing the basic ones is absolutely necessary. A mage could ignore a large portion of runes that weren't useful for them, as their capacity to retain rune knowledge was limited. These reasons were why it usually took an average mage nearly a decade to be ready to truly learn magic. They had to spend years perfecting their fundamentals, including mana control and mental resilience. Aegon had spent an enormous amount of time studying the runes, as he wasn't content with learning just a few runes. He had mastered a large number of them and constantly rehearsed them to make sure he never forgot. That was also why he could now recognize so many runes within the hologram before him. The spell sphere was like a breathtakingly intricate structure, bringing a smile to his face. Finally, the most important part of being a mage, Aegon said softly. Forming spell circles or spheres that give life to our desires. Basic knowledge of Run's language alone wasn't enough to communicate, just like how one didn't learn to speak English simply because they knew the ABCs. I need to learn to use those letters, or runes in this case, to form sentences that convey my intentions to the world. The spell sphere was the sentence in this case, formed by various runes. The world would read that sentence and carry out the command, even if it didn't like it. That was the power of runes. A sentence is formed by words, and sentences turn into paragraphs. The more detail we put into that paragraph, the better we can communicate. A spell sphere, also known as a rune sphere, determined the rank of a spell. Each rank had a specific number of spheres that made up the spell sphere. Just like this one, Aegon muttered as he counted the number of overlapping spheres in the hologram. 16. That does represent rank 4. To make a rune sphere, one needed a base, the primary rune, or the nucleus, as Aegon liked to call it. It's really like an atom. That's the best way to describe it. And the primary rune is the nucleus. The primary rune would usually represent the main law the mage was trying to influence with the spell. For example, the spell Fury of Blizzard had 2 primary runes at its center to serve as its base. Ice and wind. I can also use the base elements of ice, which are water and wind, for some reason. That way, I can still form the same sphere even if I change the main rune, but I'd have to increase the number of wind runes to balance it. Too troublesome. Aegon shifted on the bed, observing the hologram from every angle as he continued muttering to himself. It was a habit he developed to help him remember details more effectively. Once the primary runes were placed as the nucleus, one would then form layers of spheres around the core, each filled with secondary runes. The secondary runes are necessary for the functions of the spell. The primary runes served as the foundation and the main source of power, as they directly interfered with the fundamental laws, like the elemental laws themselves. The secondary runes, on the other hand, directed that power in specific ways to achieve the desired effect. Frost rune controls absolute cold, freezing effects, and crystalline formation. Gale rune governs high-velocity air currents, circulation, and directional flow. Pressure rune regulates storm intensity, wind density, and compression zones. One by one, Aegon tried to identify the secondary runes inscribed within the 16 overlapping spheres and analyze their effects. There were countless runes to study, yet he calmly continued mumbling to himself, never breaking his concentration. The higher the number of spheres, the more one could write into the spell, meaning the more complex instructions they could give the world. But naturally, forming such intricate structures was exponentially harder. There was a reason why a mage was often considered weak, even if they possessed a high number of stars in their mana core. If they didn't know how to form multiple rune spheres properly, all that power was meaningless. After all, fuel was useless if there was no vehicle to burn it in. Fascinating, but there are still many runes here I can't remember, Aegon muttered, then commanded the system, increase the size. The rune sphere expanded until it filled almost the entire room, allowing him to study it in detail from every side. The holographic layers shimmered softly as he leaned closer, tracing each rune in the air. After half an hour of intense and close observation, he finally fell face first onto the bed as the hologram faded behind him. He mumbled into the pillow, "It's so good, but I can't even use it yet. Ag, I want to use it already. Have some patience, boss." Back then, it took me years to form even my first rune sphere. Magic really tests your patience. I know. It's like someone putting a delicious chocolate cake in front of you, but all you can do is stare at it. Aegon sighed and sat up. It's not like you to interfere during my training. Did something happen? Not really. I just wanted to tell you that. I'm sorry if I disturbed you. It's fine. And thanks for your words, Aegon said, smiling faintly as he stared at the ceiling. I was getting a bit impatient, after all. Take your time, boss. I will. Normally, Hecht would cut off most of her connection with him to give him privacy, even though she still lingered within his shadows, ready to sense danger at any moment. Aegon was genuinely grateful for everything she had done for him. Thanks, Hecht. You made me blush. Aegon chuckled softly and sat back down in a lotus position to calm his mind again. Practice didn't only mean analyzing spells and runes. It also meant performing and mastering them. Since he had been focusing on the fundamentals, Aegon had managed to cast only rank 1 spells, which included only 2 rune spheres. He had mastered many rank 1 spells and was confident he could learn new ones with ease. Beyond that, sadly, he had failed repeatedly, so now his focus was on rank 2 spells, the ones composed of 4 spheres. Those were his next goal. Once again, he opened his eyes and thought, let's try Firebolt. It was a rank 2 spell he had obtained from the system, which also meant he could view its description, though that feature certainly had its limits. It won't show the description for something like Skybreaker or any other higher rank stuff. He shook off those distracting thoughts as the system fed him the spell's details again. Firebolt launches a small, fast-moving bolt of fire at the enemy. Type, spell. Rank 2. Range, 15 meters. Effect, deals moderate fire damage and has a 10% chance to ignite the target. It's just like a game. Aegon slapped his cheeks lightly and raised his hand, muttering, "This time I'll definitely succeed." There were several methods to form runes. One could do it without touching, for example, but that was something only true experts in a particular spell could manage. Since Aegon was still learning, he chose the most common approach, using his finger to form the rune sphere. "Let's do this." Aegon had once wondered about the importance of affinities if runes did all the work, but he soon found out exactly why they were so crucial. Affinities played a huge role in the conversation. If Aegon had to describe it, it would be like talking to a family member or someone you were very familiar with, someone you shared a close bond with. Those people would understand you even if you didn't use perfect language. They would also be more willing to help you and would cooperate far better than a hostile stranger ever would. Affinities acted as that close connection, except instead of people, they connected you to the laws of the world. If someone had an affinity with fire and tried to use fire-based spells, they would have a much easier time casting them than using other elemental spells. The power they received from the world would be greater, and the resistance from the laws would also be weaker because those very laws were willingly allowing themselves to be used. This was the reason affinities were so important. They practically dictated what type of spells a mage should learn. As Aegon raised his hand, he sensed mana flowing out of his mana core under his precise instructions. It passed through the dense network of mana circuits and finally reached his fingertip. It was formless, odorless, and invisible, but Aegon could feel it. Every mage could. The mana seeped out of his fingertips and began to dissolve into the atmosphere, naturally drawn back toward where it originally belonged. Aegon quickly brought it under his control and began using his fingertips like a pen, with mana as the ink, to carve runes in the air. The primary rune came first, so he drew the familiar rune of fire in front of him. The world resisted a little, but his affinity with fire made that resistance nearly negligible. Once the rune was fully drawn, it became visible as it burned in a bright crimson hue. The laws of the world had already started to react to its existence, and the surrounding temperature shifted slightly, even from that single rune alone. Sustaining this for long is the main problem. The longer he held the rune in the air, the more the world resisted it and the harder it became for him to maintain control. That was why he had to move fast. In the next moment, he drew a circular sphere around the primary rune and began carving the secondary runes on its surface. He had already studied the Firebolt's rune sphere in detail, so he was familiar with the patterns. The first sphere contains 3 runes. With that, he began his work. In just a few seconds, the first sphere was completed. It shimmered faintly in existence, resonating with the primary rune as it absorbed its energy, ready to channel it when commanded. The second sphere. With each sphere's formation came the burden of sustaining it. Not only did the world resist its existence, after all, who would willingly allow themselves to be commanded? But even the mana itself rebelled, trying to return to the world's raw essence. It wanted to go home. So Aegon had to multitask, carving runes, maintaining stability, and resisting the world's pushback all at once. His mind felt like it was being split into 3. Distance is the punctuation. Just like in a sentence, punctuation could change the entire meaning. In rune spheres, the distance and placement of each rune played the same critical role. A specific distance represented a specific intention. If it wasn't maintained properly, the world might misinterpret the spell and execute the wrong command. Aegon had once learned this lesson the hard way. During one of his early experiments, he had been creating a fireball but had slightly misaligned the runes, causing the fireball to shoot backward instead of forward. If he hadn't been immune to fire, his face would have been permanently charred that day. It really wasn't a pleasant memory. That was why he now paid extreme attention to every single rune's placement, even if it took more time. Second sphere completed. Finally, the second sphere came to life, containing 5 runes placed at even distances from one another. The formation pulsed with crimson energy, intertwining with the first sphere in perfect harmony. The third one. Aegon wiped the sweat from his forehead and took a deep breath. His concentration sharpened like a blade, as he knew this was the critical stage. He had always struggled to complete the third sphere. "I won't fail this time," He had prepared for this moment for a long time. Once again, he poured his focus into forming the next set of runes on the third sphere while maintaining control over the first two. 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time he carved the fourth rune, sweat dripped from his forehead like a stream, yet his eyes still held that unshakable concentration. Even for a moment, he didn't lose his focus. His hands didn't tremble despite the mounting pressure. He clenched his fists slightly to steady himself, then drew more mana from his core to fuel the structure. This was one of the hardest aspects of spellcraft, maintaining a stable mana flow while shaping it into complex runic structures. Spell creation demanded an immense amount of mana because it served as both ink and energy to maintain those structures. Even with perfect mana control, some mana would always leak or destabilize, forcing the mage to feed more into the runes to keep them from collapsing. That was why mana circulation techniques were so valuable. They basically detected the amount and quality of the mana one would absorb. Aegon's mana was not only denser than that of his peers, but also greater in quantity, even though if they all had the same number of stars in their mana core. That was why he could practice for much longer than others before exhaustion settled in. 7. Aegon muttered through gritted teeth, his eyes burning with focus, but he refused to blink. He continued to stare at the formation, suppressing the trembling in his body. After a few tense seconds, he raised his hand once more and traced the air. The final rune of the third sphere began to take shape, delicate yet blazing with power. The 8th rune. The pressure intensified rapidly. He could feel the entire structure trembling on the verge of collapse. One tiny mistake, and the rebellious mana would tear everything apart, either dissipating harmlessly or worse, causing a dangerous backlash. Aegon knew all of that, but none of it mattered. His mind was blank except for the image of the incomplete rune before him. He had failed this step countless times before, but this time he could feel it. Success was just within his hands. He ignored the pounding headache, the searing pain behind his eyes, and even the bile rising in his throat. Then, with one smooth motion, his finger moved through the air. The final rune came alive, elegant, flawless, and blazing in radiant crimson light. The third rune sphere shimmered brilliantly in the room, illuminating every corner with its fiery glow. Out of 4 rune spheres, Aegon had finally managed to form 3 of them. The exhaustion finally won over Aegon after he completed the third rune sphere, making his mind go numb for a moment. But even in that state, he maintained the spell sphere. Only when he was able to think again did he raise his head and stare at the marvelous structure before him. His lips tugged into a lopsided grin. Finally, and then he dispersed the spell sphere as it slowly crumbled away, the mana mixing peacefully with the surroundings. This needed to be done. Aegon dropped back onto the bed and closed his eyes for a moment. He knew his limits, and even though he liked to push them, as he had just done, he didn't want to go too far, as that would no longer be productive. Creating the third rune sphere had already exhausted him greatly, both mentally and physically. If he tried making the fourth immediately afterward, only severe consequences awaited him. I might have skipped the first day of academy if I continued. Aegon chuckled and raised his hand upward, then clenched it tightly. Still, I did it. Just one more sphere, and I'll become a proper 2-star mage. Even though his mana core had reached 3-star, he wouldn't be counted as such unless he could cast a rank 3 spell properly. That was the foundation of mage rankings. He rested for around 15 minutes, during which he used his mana circulation technique. It helped him recover faster than anyone else, and before long, he was ready to try again. This was yet another benefit of possessing a mythical-rank mana circulation technique. Afterward, he spent the rest of the day trying to perfect his third rune sphere instead of rushing to create the fourth. He always focused on his foundation first. Besides, in his current state, he knew he would just lose control over the third rune sphere. So, he focused entirely on recreating the third rune sphere again and again. Though he failed a few times, he was gradually getting used to it and would soon be able to form it without much effort. That would be the day he attempted the fourth rune sphere. The evening quarter has begun. Aegon opened his eyes upon hearing the system notification, a yawn escaping his mouth as he slowly sat up. Taking some rest after practice was always necessary. It's already evening, Aegon muttered as he looked out the window. What's the time via Earth's clock? 7:16 p.m. I see. This world had its own version of a clock, though it was a rougher kind like sand clocks and other simple methods. Since Dusk City always remained under the same eternal sky, the mages had installed a giant sand clock in the central plaza's tower. It showed the time for everyone. One full spin of it represented around 12 hours, so it turned at dusk and dawn. That was how people distinguished time in a city that was forever trapped in twilight. Mages and others had their own ways of tracking time too, so a proper invention like a watch was never made. Even Aegon didn't think much about it, since he never measured time before doing anything. I guess I'll work on that too. It's just a watch, so it shouldn't be too tough, Aegon muttered before stepping out of his room. Seeing the dimly lit lanterns in the hall, he was reminded of another thing he'd been thinking about for quite some time. Fuel. Proper fuel. Since this world had mana stones, no other proper energy source like oil or electricity had ever been discovered. After all, mages didn't need such things. There were probably times when mages suppressed the inventions of mortals too. They must have felt like mortals were challenging them. That was another reason why this world's technology remained stagnant and centered around magic. Aegon had once tried searching for traces of crude oil, but found something far more interesting. Apparently, since everything in this world was made of essence, it also returned to its raw form to merge back with the world. Therefore, there was no oil here. All the fossils had turned into essence and seeped back into the land. But that was where the interesting part began. Since fossils were buried deep within the earth, their essence mixed with stones and other materials underground under immense pressure. That was how mana stones were formed and later mined by all races. But they were incredibly important for mages and other high-ranking individuals. The demand was so great that mana stones became too expensive for ordinary people. The common folk could only afford low-grade mana stones, which barely contained any mana. The main problem with mana stones is that they're like one-time batteries. Once used, they turn into regular stones and crumble into dust. They aren't reusable, Aegon muttered as he stared at the lantern. It was powered by a mana stone too, as this was still the home of a princess, so such luxuries were common and even necessary. What are you looking at? He heard a lazy voice and turned, only to see Callie stumbling inside with a few wounds on her arms and exhaustion written across her long, pretty face. Were you training? Aegon asked calmly, knowing those wounds would heal in no time. That was one of the benefits of being a rank 5 knight. Even internal injuries healed rapidly. Yes, that hospital guy was weak, but he managed to pierce through one of my weak spots. Even I didn't know about that, so I was working on it, Callie replied as she washed her hands and then chugged a prepared juice made from some fruit. Then she flopped down onto the sofa and asked, "You still didn't answer me. I'm just wondering if I can make these lanterns affordable enough for even mundane people to have their homes lit all night with these," Aegon said as he took out the mana stone from the lantern and examined it. Callie looked confused by his words and asked, "You want to sell lanterns now? What's the catch? Do they explode after some time? Why do you and Zav always assume I'm working on explosives whenever I try to create something? Because they're fun. Explosion is an art, little brother." As annoying as Xavier was, Aegon had long gotten used to his nonsense, so he didn't even show a change of expression. He simply continued to stare at him even after they had finished their business in the toilet. "What is it?" Xavier asked as he leaned against the wall. "You have something to tell me?" Aegon asked, leaning against the opposite wall of the corridor. Fortunately, nobody was coming there since the show was about to start. Only some idiots would choose this timing to come to the toilet. Xavier stayed silent for a few seconds, his expression unusually serious before he finally said, "I think I have a clue about what's happening between those two." "Something related to the other students?" Aegon asked. "So you noticed it too?" "I really shouldn't be surprised," Xavier chuckled softly. "When those girls came to greet her, my dear sister made sure her figure was hidden behind you. She didn't even look at them, as if she was afraid they would recognize her. Did something happen in the academy? Aegon asked, unable to understand why someone like Callie would hide from anyone. As one would expect from someone idolizing Shio, Callie wasn't afraid of anyone. The girl who gave blunt replies, even to the dean, was now avoiding a few random girls from the academy. That didn't sit right with anyone who knew her well. There was simply no way she would be scared of anyone. Not that I know of, but I'm sure if something did happen, Sister Luna would have noticed. She's very perceptive about matters relating to us. That much was true. So, there must be another reason why she tried to hide. Xavier sighed in dejection. What that reason is, though, is beyond me. Because of us, Aegon answered for him. She didn't want to go to the restaurant, remember? Then she became normal again at home. And now this. It seems like she just doesn't want others to see her with us. Hey, why am I offended in this? Xavier clicked his tongue and complained. She never tried to cut her connection with me like she did with Sister Luna. Isn't that a good thing? Why the heck are you pouting? Because it's my mouth. Stop doing that, idiot. Only cute girls look good when pouting, not ugly jackals like you. Have you ever seen a hyena? Now imagine it pouting. Act. Xavier kicked his calf and looked away. Then he said softly, "Does she feel inferior to her?" "I doubt it," Aegon said as they began walking back to the room. "We'll just have to find out." When they returned to their room, they were greeted with a familiar sight. Luna looking warmly at Callie, while the latter pretended not to be affected by it. "They're cute," Xavier smiled, watching their behavior. "And dumb. Guess I inherited the best of my parents." Aegon rolled his eyes at him, but had to agree with his first half. They are cute and also love each other. Callie could have argued with Luna about this if she was truly uncomfortable, but she clearly doesn't. Is she what you called Sunder, a host? Nah, not fully at least. He took the seat between them while Xavier joined Luna on her right. Aegon could already guess the reason. He'll talk nonsense, so he's afraid Callie will beat him up. The opera house was already full by then. The ground floor seats were booked by commoners, while the gallery rooms were reserved for nobles and other influential people. "It's very popular in the Empire," Luna explained with a smile. "The main stage of the opera house comes to Dusk City every 2 months, so everyone gets excited for it. Even commoners save their money just to watch it." Aegon could see that clearly among the commoners' glistening eyes as they accompanied their loved ones, faces full of bright smiles. Even he was excited, so he could relate to them, even if he didn't show it openly. His lips tugged upward as he turned toward the large stage, which was still hidden behind a velvet curtain. "I really hope it's worth their money then." "It's never disappointed anyone before," Luna smiled. "It's starting." The curtains were lifted as the lights dimmed around the audience and instead focused on the stage, where the setting of the play was already prepared. A man clad in tight armor stepped forward, his face full of scars and desperation etched into his expression. His loud shout began the play. Aegon was so engrossed in it that he even forgot where he was, but still, he noticed a few details that left him amazed. They're using illusion rune formations for stage preparation and mana crystals to control the lighting effects. There's even a sound amplifier rune formation to enhance the performance. They really put in a lot of money. It was clear why commoners had to save up for months to get a chance to watch this play. It was definitely worth it. Their acting is also pretty good. Even though the plot is fairly basic, everything else brings out its potential beyond its limit. I really want something like this in theaters. His eyes burned with passion as he watched everything with interest. If he had to make a list of what he liked most in his previous life, the word fiction would definitely be at the top. It was the reason he could live for so long. It gave him hope, dreams, and a chance to live even while confined to a hospital bed. So it needn't be said that the emotions and passion he held for it were unmatchable. Now, he wanted to bring out its true potential in this world and show people the new heights that dramas like these could reach. Entertainment. It might seem meaningless to some, but it was life for many, Aegon being one of them. And he wanted to make that many even greater in this world. "I will become the entertainment king of this world." Be it noble or commoner, they will all see the true potential of this industry. Aegon swore as his golden eyes blazed like a summer noon sun. He was determined to make it a reality. The play was about a colonel, a mountain of a man, who was betrayed by his superiors. The same men who sold their souls to the demons and prepared a stage of destruction for the Empire. The colonel, stationed in an important border city, then had to deal with an army 10 times greater than his for days because he lost communications with the outside world due to those superiors. Worse, half of his battalion abandoned and left the city. If that city had fallen, almost 500,000 people residing there would be dead, and a massive weakness would have opened in the Empire's defenses against the demons. The stakes were high, but the colonel, despite being on the weaker and disadvantaged side, fought with tactics and his army of 5,000 men against an army of 100,000 demons of all ranks. As days went by, their numbers began to dwindle until only the colonel remained defending the city. He stood like the mountain he was and defended the city till his last breath. Even as he was dying, he didn't let the enemies get past him. His sacrifice, along with many others, bought enough time for the Empire to notice the anomaly and bring reinforcements. The demons were repelled, and the city saved at the expense of 5,000 brave soldiers and the colonel, who was said to have been born with a talent rivaling the emperor himself. The human domain lost him as well. The play had many more scenes which highlighted the colonel's life in the city while he changed slowly and gave up everything for the citizens. It was a heartbreaking story filled with blood-pumping moments and great fights that made the audience almost jump out of their seats. The sound, the visuals, the acting, everything was just perfect. Aegon watched everything solemnly, his eyes calmly staring at the man who played the colonel's role. He couldn't help but admire him. At first, he had been excited and drawn into the play, so he didn't notice, but now he knew very well that the play was based on a real story. He even knew the colonel very well. Hearing soft sniffing beside him, Aegon turned to find Luna shedding tears while holding hands with Xavier, who also had wet eyes but didn't let any tears fall. "I respect them. I really do," Callie mumbled as she bowed her head toward the stage. "They're true warriors." "Do you think he was betrayed because of his talent?" Xavier asked. "No, the demons had simply prepared it for years." Aegon shook his head, understanding his meaning. "You seem so certain," Callie said. "I know him, the one whose story they took as a basis for this play," Aegon said, his voice low and solemn. "Noah Augustus, younger brother of Arnold Augustus." "He's Gramps' younger brother?" Xavier's surprise was clear in his voice and face. "Yes, he became a colonel at just the age of 20, Aegon explained. But the siege of Bologna took his life. The play exaggerated a few things while undermining others, but it was a hopeless situation. If they had lost that city, then the Empire would have suffered immense losses." He took a deep breath and continued, "But it's still pretty good. I didn't think they could show his life like this. At least it will motivate the youths to defend their home, I guess. From what I know about him, he would have liked this." "I'll be surprised if it didn't," Luna said, wiping away her tears. "They got something wrong, though," Aegon said with a sad smile. "The Empire didn't save that city, not at all. By the time they reached there, it was already secured." "What do you mean?" Callie asked in confusion. "Where do you think Oppa got his title of White Death?" Aegon sighed. He was the first to notice the abnormalities and went to check on his brother himself, but he couldn't make it in time. Granduncle was already taking his last breaths, and there were still a few days before the Empire could do anything. Then, Callie could already guess what he was going to say. Yes, that day, Oppa slaughtered 50,000 demons all alone, painting many kilometers of land with their white blood. Aegon said, still feeling chills as he remembered Shio telling him tales of Arnold. "But I guess they don't want to paint the Empire in a bad light." "Quite understandable." The room was silent for a while as everyone processed the information. Aegon could relate to how they felt, because he had felt the same when he heard it the first time. It was simply ridiculous to think a kind old man like Arnold could be such a terrifying being. But it was one of the many acts done by Augustus to secure the safety of the Empire. This is the reason why Augustus always have the lowest number of people despite being one of the most prominent houses of the Empire, Aegon said, still staring at the man as the whole cast bowed toward the audience. They never managed to live past their youth. As they heard his words, they realized it was indeed true. Even currently, There were only 5 Augustus alive. That was way too small for a giant house like Augustus. It truly was a family of martyrs. They didn't have any words to say, as they knew whatever they said wouldn't mean much. So, they simply did what they thought was the only worthy thing here. All of them stood up from their seats and began clapping. Previously, only the ground floor audience was clapping for the staff, but with their cue, the whole gallery buzzed with the sound of applause. So many people gave a standing ovation, making the staff emotional as they once again bowed and thanked everyone for everything. It was a good play, Aegon said with a smile as they left their exclusive room. Yes, I told you it'd be worth it. They make great plays. Luna was finally smiling again. Xavier noticed Callie being silent as she continued to stare at her hand, so he patted her shoulder and whispered softly, "Don't think about it. I'm not. I can never be like them." Callie shook her head at his words. While they were passing by a corridor, they overheard a conversation which made them stop in their tracks. "Did you hear that the cursed child of Augustus is back in the Empire?" "Sure. Speak carefully, but yes, I did hear about that. He really is talented." "What's the point of that when you're cursed? Why do you call him cursed?" "You don't know? The day he was born, a Valerian died, and that's a bad omen. Not to mention his parents had a divorce soon after because of him. He became the curse that broke his family apart. Now that you say it like that, he's indeed cursed. He broke a family like Augustus completely and even took General Arnold out of the Empire. I'm going to kill them." Xavier rolled up his sleeves as his eyes burned brighter than fire itself. Callie had also taken out her gauntlets, giving silent confirmation to Xavier's idea. Even Luna didn't say anything as she just stared coldly at the room where the voices had come from. Of all people, she knew she shouldn't be impulsive at the moment, and Callie was the same, but there were moments where one's mind would be clouded by intense emotions. "Stop!" All of them halted at Aegon's voice. Xavier clicked his tongue as he already knew this was going to happen, while Callie sighed and threw the gauntlets back into her storage ring. "You really want to let them go after they insulted you like that?" Luna asked. "It's just random rambling of random people. Why should I concern myself with their shitty opinion?" Aegon shrugged without a care. "You 3 of all should understand this better. The more popular you were, the more people would envy you, which would turn into hate, and then those haters would badmouth and spread rumors just to satisfy their little egos." Aegon had seen that happen a lot on social media, so he understood it very well. "Their opinion on me is just as meaningless as they are meaningless to me," Aegon said as he began walking again. "Give them the attention they want, and they'll draw you to their level. It's pointless. Yeah, you'll lose nothing and gain nothing because of them." "I already know that," Xavier grumbled, but still followed him. Aegon smiled and ruffled his hair, making him even more irritated like a cat. He could understand them because he knew he was no different than they were. Didn't he react when his family was insulted back in the stadium? They were the same. They couldn't handle someone insulting their family. He felt blessed to have such good friends who would get angry on his behalf. He turned toward Callie, who still gave hostile glances at the door of that room. "Callie, let's go. I want to have a talk with the manager here." Of course, the one he had to stop before anyone else was his own shadow. "Boss, I promise nobody will even know. Just once. Forget it. It isn't worth dirtying your hands." Meeting the manager became easy once they learned who had come to meet him. By that time, Aegon had already forgotten about the earlier scene. It was just as he said, too pointless to think about what others thought of him. As long as his loved ones were on his side, he didn't care about anything else. As for the conversation itself, he didn't feel much from it either, because he knew he wasn't the culprit for what had happened back then. At one point in his life, he might have felt guilty, but Arnold and Shio had made sure he never thought of it that way again. His birth didn't cause the family to break apart. The choices they all made did. It was they who broke it, not him. The only ones he truly felt guilty about were his siblings, as he did take their grandpa and aunt with him, unintentionally hoarding their love when his siblings had equal rights to it. He also knew that despite accompanying him throughout his life, his grandpa and Shio had always kept their eyes on his siblings as well. Both of them loved his siblings deeply, but things had simply become too complicated for everyone involved. But even that guilt was faint because his siblings had never really tried to contact any of them. Arnold had only blocked his father from meeting him, not his siblings. They could have met them whenever they wanted, but clearly they didn't want to. All in all, their family situation was far too complicated, so Aegon didn't really want to think too much about it, let alone care about some random stranger's opinion of it. Whatever. I'll just see what to do if we ever meet, and if we don't, then thinking about it is pointless. Soon, they were at the top floor and entered the manager's office. A room full of dozens of bookshelves lined along the walls greeted them. At the center of this yellowish room sat the manager, a short, old man named Harris, with a pot-belly and a receding hairline. Seeing them, he stood up from his seat and greeted them with a warm smile before coming to the point. Seems like young Master Aegon recognized it very quickly. Yes, the story is based off Ser Noah, the legend of Bologna, and I apologize if I made any mistakes. No, you didn't, Aegon smiled and said. It was actually very good, so I came to thank you for it. There's no need for that. Really, Harris chuckled softly and said. I'm actually one of the survivors of Bologna, so I owed this much to Ser Noah. You knew him personally? Callie asked in mild surprise. I won't say that, but I did meet him once, Harris nodded. He was my idol, and also the reason why I'm sitting here alive. So, I've been preparing for this drama for quite a while. No wonder he got everything so well done, Aegon thought. I apologize for the ending, Harris said, glancing at Aegon. I need to keep my house running, so I couldn't display what really happened back then. It's fine. I understand your position, and Opal was never a fan of fame anyway, so it's actually better this way. Aegon waved his hand and said, That's good, that's good. Harris smiled and leaned forward. So, how may I serve you, young master? Is there anything I can help you with? I don't think you came just to thank me. Yes, I do have something I wanted to ask of you, Aegon said, happy to see that Harris was understanding quickly. I was thinking if you'd be interested in doing a play based on something I wrote. You also write, young master? Harris's eyes sparkled with excitement. Then, it's a small request, but I still have to check it first. I don't mean to offend you, but I do care about what I'm showing to the public. No big deal, Aegon said. It'll be a short drama. You can try out during your slow days to gauge the public reaction. If it doesn't work out, I don't think it'll have much effect on your house. If you put it that way, I don't really have any reason to refuse, Harris smiled. Give me the script as soon as you can, and I'll see what I can do. It'll be delivered to you tomorrow, Aegon replied. Also, remember that the target audience is the ladies of noble households. Seems like you've already done your research, Harris said, saying nothing further out of courtesy. Aegon also understood that, but didn't point it out. Harris had to run his business, so he wouldn't agree just because of Aegon's status. If it were anyone else, they might have had to go through multiple channels to get such an opportunity. So, he didn't think much of it. After all, he was confident his written drama would do very well. Reading fiction had been the only thing he did in his previous life, so copying some of those tropes and techniques wouldn't be a problem. System, assimilate with skill, professional author. Normally, he might have preferred exploring this profession himself, but he didn't really have the time to invest in it. So, he chose to finally assimilate this one skill that had been rotting in his inventory for years. Commencing the assimilation of skill, in the next second, tons of information loaded into his brain, giving him the knowledge of countless aspects of being an author. Be it literary devices, plotting formulas, dialogue rhythm, pacing, or even detailed character sheets, everything was ingrained in his memory with absolute clarity. He exhaled softly and smiled again at Harris. Then we'll take our leave. Hope we meet soon. I also won't take too much of your time, Harris said, standing up again and accompanying them to the door. It was a show of respect that wasn't just for formality. He truly respected Aegon, and it wasn't hard to understand why. Anyone could. By the time they were on their way back home, Aegon could feel 3 pairs of eyes staring at him. They hadn't said anything back in a room, but now they clearly wanted answers. How many more things do you want to do? Xavier asked, sighing in exasperation. You already have too much on your plate, buddy. None of them were really surprised that he was writing a play, because he had often told them fascinating stories throughout their childhood. They would always get drawn into the worlds he created, so they knew he'd succeed, but the problem was something else entirely. Xavier wasn't wrong. Just the practice for the 3 pathways took most of Aegon's time. Then he also had his head buried in inventions, and if that wasn't enough, he was also planning to take cooking classes at the academy. Now that I think about it, it really is a lot. But he didn't have a problem with it, because he enjoyed doing every single one of those things. It's not like I'm doing this professionally, Aegon responded calmly. I just like this industry, so I want to expand my company into it. I'm just thinking long-term. So, this is for the connections? Luna guessed. Yes, as you said, the Moonvale Opera House is quite big, so it'll be helpful, Aegon nodded. Perhaps I can also help. I know some chatty girls that can advertise for us. Luna tapped her chin thoughtfully. That'd be great. If the first play is successful, then Harris would be more inclined to invest in me, Aegon said, leaning back on the comfortable seats. The rest of the ride was as usual. They talked about nonsensical things, teasing and laughing along the way. In the morning, Aegon woke up quite early, wanting to get back into his routine. From a very young age, he had been subjected to army discipline by his oppa, and it had become a habit to follow many of those rules. Waking up early to train his body was just one of them, especially since he got a boost during sunrise and sunset. Here in Dusk City, though, that boost was permanent, but he still wanted to follow his routine. As he had expected, when he stepped out of his room, he found only Callie awake, making juice from some fruits while the other 2 slept soundly. Good morning. Want me to make cartilage juice for you too? She asked. Morning, and yes, please do so, Aegon said as he began tying up the weight bracelets on his arms and legs. Cartilage juice. It's like a protein shake, but much more powerful. Mundane humans would die drinking that, and even mages would suffer greatly. But it was great for knights who needed that essence boost for their training. So, it wasn't a surprise Callie was making it. Aegon himself had made plenty of those essence-boosting juices for his own regimen. Here you go. Callie handed him the glass absent-mindedly. As Aegon took sips of the juice, he glanced at her expression and asked, Want to accompany me for a run? We can also trade some blows, because I feel like I'm stagnating there. Sure. Callie's expression instantly brightened as a grin spread across her face. Yup, this is the best way to distract her from her thoughts. As one might expect, the morning in Dusk City was no different from any other time, and even the weather remained the same. The winds were cool at least, so that was a good thing. Once they were ready, they went for a run outside the city. Callie's weights were much heavier than Aegon's, yet she easily matched his speed and even overtook him several times. This was just one of the many methods to train one's body. They were burning the excessive essence they had gained from the cartilage juice. One more round. Callie laughed as they finished their 10th round of the city. Sweat dripped from her body, her clothes clinging to her athletic figure. Aegon smiled, being in the same condition, and increased his speed even more using the boost of the sun. Dusk City was large, so a single round covered several kilometers, and they were running all of that with heavy weights slowing them down. Their muscles burned and then healed rapidly with the excessive essence flowing through their bodies in an unending cycle. Before long, they completed the last round and collapsed on a grassy field not far from the city. The twilight sky reflected in their eyes as their chests heaved up and down, breaths heavy but satisfied. After a few moments of shared silence, Callie raised her hand, examining something in it. Aegon followed her gaze and looked at her calloused hand filled with countless tiny scars that ran up to her arms, marks still unable to heal completely. Proof of the days she had worked relentlessly to reach her current rank. Little gone, do you think my hands are dirty? Callie asked quietly. They're beautiful. Aegon gave his honest opinion, as always. Perhaps knowing that he wouldn't lie to her, Callie smiled softly and said, Perhaps they would be better without all this hard work. Soft, squishy hands, right? They look even more beautiful and attractive. What are you trying to say, Callie? Aegon asked directly. I'm just wondering why people find these hands ugly, Callie mumbled, her tone betraying any emotion she might have been feeling. They do. Aegon raised an eyebrow and said, People with trash taste are increasing in number then. Huh, you always have something to say. Callie laughed, but there was no humor in her voice. Can you guess the number of friends I've found here? 0, Aegon said flatly. Hey, that hurts. Am I wrong then? Callie was silent at that. After a moment, she said, "Why do so many people have a problem with women being knights?" Aegon glanced at her before replying. "Because they are rare. Women are either mages, or they give up completely on trying to become stronger," Callie said, as if giving him the reason for that rarity. "They don't want to go through the hardships of the body pathway." "Can you blame them?" Aegon asked, staring at the twilight sky. Not awakening the mage pathway is already a bad thing for them. Not to mention, they have to work harder than men in the body pathway. The body pathway was heavily dependent on one's essence, and the male body generally had a higher essence capacity, so it was quite natural that it would be more favorable for them, just like how the mage pathway was more favorable for the female body due to its structure. But in a society filled with knights, men dominated the ranks, and a woman trying to enter those circles had to try much harder. Even then, she would still most likely be rejected. Society had made it so that women either became mages or remained ordinary humans. Men didn't like women in their field because they didn't think women fit there, while many women gave up on the hardships, preferring to live a safe and secure life instead. "So I'm getting rejected just because I try to become a knight?" Callie chuckled dryly. "Men reject my presence for that reason, and women are no different. Some of them are even worse because they think I would have become a great mage." "You already are a great mage," Aegon pointed out and asked, "but I don't get where you're going with this. Do you want to be accepted by them?" "Fat chance. If they can't respect me for who I am, then I don't care about them," Callie said, but Aegon could still see that she was affected by it. It was quite natural. Being rejected by everyone leaves a mental scar that isn't easy to heal. Aegon understood it very well because he, too, had been rejected by everyone in his previous life. He sighed and asked, "Do you want to talk to your idol?" "Huh? What?" Callie's cheeks flushed instantly. "And no, I'm fine." "Well, I already called her," Aegon said, showing her the communication stone and smiling mischievously. "What are you doing?" "Sure, just wait." Aegon could have comforted her or said some words of encouragement, but he knew none of those would be truly effective. The best way to help was to let her talk to someone who had gone through the same thing. Despite Callie's protests, Aegon still continued the call, and soon they heard a familiar voice he loved so much. "Miss me?" "I bet you did." "I definitely did," Aegon smiled and said. "Show, I won." His words were cut off by the sound of an explosion from the other side. It was so loud that even they could feel the slight vibration from here. "What was that?" he asked, wondering if she had already found the bandaged man. "Oh, nothing much. We just found a demon camp on our way, so we're destroying that." "What a coincidence, huh?" "Jason, get your ass out of there and chase after that bastard." "Santiago, stop pissing and destroy them." Aegon was left speechless by her actions. Did she really not think it was too coincidental that they found a demon camp while searching for the bandaged man? "Show language." "Ahem, my bad. I forgot we were still on the line for a moment." Aegon rolled his eyes at her. "How did you not suspect it? The signs say the camp is very old. So, they've been preparing it for a while. They knew I would attend the academy," Aegon said, narrowing his eyes slightly. "Yes, I'll find him quickly, even if there are 100 more delays." Her tone turned serious, determination radiating from her words. Aegon smiled faintly, knowing that if anyone could find the bandaged man, it was her. Aegon could actually understand why Shio skipped over the coincidence part. Their family hated demons to the core, especially the current generation, so the enemies used that hatred to distract her. They knew she would destroy the demon camp at any cost because she hated them too much. And their assumption proved right, as even when Shio realized it was just a distraction, she was still hell-bent on destroying that camp. "Just be careful and use your brain, Shio." "Are you lecturing me?" "Yes, since it's my baby who's lecturing me. I'll bow my head and listen." Aegon rolled his eyes and said, "Anyway, I called you for something else. Someone is going through some mental gymnastics, so can you help her out?" "Are you sure you're asking the right person?" "Because my solution to mental gymnastics is fists. Heck, Dad usually has to solve my problems for me. But this is something only you can handle. If you say so, I'll try my best." "Who needs help?" Aegon turned toward Callie, who just glared at him in return. So he decided to ask himself, Shio, did you face rejection when you chose to be a knight? If you mean people giving me their dirty looks, then yes. I flip a middle finger at them, though, so I got punishment. Punishment? I was in the barracks, little Sunday. You think those nosy superiors could handle that? I'm having a hard time believing you actually took their punishment silently. Of course not. Why would I? I burnt their pants, so the next day their asses were on full display for the whole army. Bro had to do a lot to save me from that one. Aegon couldn't help but chuckle. Even Callie forgot her embarrassment and shared muffled laughs with him. Seriously, though, people were always against me choosing the body pathway, as if I was committing some grave mistake. Many of them even believed it was just a child's delusion and that I'd eventually come around and become a mage. Aegon nodded, even though she couldn't see it. Arnold had told him how nobody ever liked Shio because they thought she was too wild. I got kicked out of the army, which I certainly don't mind, but even after that, I got the same looks everywhere. Now things are a bit better, but back then, a woman choosing to become a knight was seen as her going rogue. So yeah, I get what you mean by being rejected by everyone. Callie was listening attentively by now, her breathing slightly uneven as she absorbed every word. She hesitated for a while before asking. Then, how did you solve it? Oh, it's you who's in this problem, my dear niece. Io. Silly child, I didn't solve it at all. Why should I? Who are they to decide my life? Callie lowered her head. Callie, remember one thing. Very few people get to do whatever they want in this world, and I was among that few. Sure, I got rejected by everyone, but what did it matter? They were strangers. They held no value in my life. In fact, the more they hated me, the more it motivated me to slap their faces harder. Guess what? Now those same people beg for my help. She took a deep breath, then lowered her voice, still carrying that commanding, fearsome aura. People are weak, mundane, ordinary, so they bundle together in a group of weaklings. They cling tightly to one another, and whenever someone tries to escape their group, they get scared. They fear their own truth, so they do everything they can to drag others back into their group. They'll grab your legs, your arms, even your thoughts, everything to chain you down to their little, weak, stagnant circle because they don't want to face their own fears. Callie shivered hearing that, her hand trembling slightly. She bit her lip and asked in a shaky voice, then, how did you get out of their group? I forced my way out. This'll try to chain me down, but ahead of me, outside of their pathetic little group, were a few people who smiled warmly at me. Their eyes showed support and understanding, so I reached out to them, and they helped me get out of that shithole. Those people still try to pull me back, but I trusted the ones who trusted me. I didn't look back because the only way forward was in front of me, where those people waited for me. Callie clenched her fists, though Aegon could see they were still trembling, as if she was afraid of something. Soon, he got the answer as she asked quietly, her voice cracking. But what if your selfish desires to get out made the people supporting you suffer? What if that weak group attacked those people, trying to drag them down too? A tear slid down her cheek as she choked out her words. They are so bright while we are the odd ones out. What if we rub our filth on them? They support you, but all you do is dirty them. Silly child, have you even asked their opinion? Do they care about your filth? Callie's body stiffened as she buried her head in her knees, making herself small and fragile. But Shio's voice softened, filled with warmth and strength as she continued to speak. They already know about our oddness and still choose to support us. Why? Ask them if they care about being dirty in the first place. I did ask, and all I got in return was a warm smile that told me that even if I'm the dirtiest person in this world, their arms would still welcome me. That's when I knew I just had to reach those arms, no matter what anyone else said. Callie had stopped talking by then. Her body seemed so small, frail, and weak, even though she was a rank 5 knight. Don't assume things, child. Life is so short, so why waste your time overthinking? Just ask those people if they can handle your oddness, if they're willing to get dirty for you. If they are, then what are you so worried about? Then, Shio's attention shifted toward Aegon. What happened? I don't know, but I have a guess, Aegon said, glancing at the curled-up Callie. Don't worry. You helped enough. I can handle things from here. Oh, all right. Also, just tell that silly child that the world isn't ending just because some random people don't care about her. I'm here, aren't I? Didn't she idolize me? If her idol is standing alongside her, then what's the problem? Fuck everyone else, and no, I don't care about language right now. Aegon smiled faintly, hearing her voice fade out with that familiar fiery tone. It was loud, brash, and unapologetically hers, exactly what Callie needed to hear.